of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's lots to talk about between now and 7 o'clock, including Keir Starmer's U-turn on the winter fuel allowance. I think it's probably going to come on the 11th of June, which is the spending review that Rachel Reeves will have. They've realised it is their poll tax moment. What do you think about this? Has Starmer finally got the message, or is he just scrambling to keep up with the public? 0344 499 1000. Boris Johnson, remember him? He says Starmer's Britain is turning into a police state after the Lucy Connolly judgment. That came up at Prime Minister's Questions today. I was talking about that with Julia Hartley-Brewer a little bit earlier on. But has Boris Johnson got any right to talk about this when he locked us all down? Surely that was a police state. Also, as emerged this afternoon, a migrant boat has forced a flotilla commemorating Dunkirk to divert in the Channel. Yes, really, this is a migrant boat that was told the flotilla was told to keep a mile away from them because this migrant boat was coming across the Channel. That's what the Coast Guard, Border Force and indeed the French said. We'll be talking about winter fuel cuts. As I said, Diane Abbott says it could be Starmer's poll tax moment. Also, has Israel gone beyond just self-defence? Are the attacks on Gaza intolerable? That certainly is the position of the UK government. What do you think? We'll speak to Elon Levy, former Israeli government spokesman in Tel Aviv. Keeping with migrants, actually, and a small boat migrant's dog was looked after for 4 months by you in quarantine, costing thousands of pounds. How many winter fuel allowances could that actually have paid for? Also, we're going to have an update on the big match tonight, of course, in Bilbao. And under 40s more open to dating Reform UK voters than Tories. Would you swipe right for a right-winger? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. And remember, the main number does 3 things. You can send me a voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Those are the numbers. Let's get going with Talk Drive. Lots to discuss between now and 7. Well, the big news today, of course, about Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions just after 12 o'clock after a planted question from a Labour backbencher who asked him about providing for old people. he announced that the winter fuel allowance almost certainly will be changed. He's about to do a U-turn on this. I don't know how many people it's going to be for. We'll find out the detail when the spending review happens on Wednesday, the 11th of June. But this is what Keir Starmer said in Parliament earlier today.
As the economy improves, we want to make sure people feel those improvements in their days as their lives go forward. And that is why we want to ensure that as we go forward, more pensioners are eligible for winter fuel payments. As you would expect, Mr. Speaker, we will only make decisions we can afford. That is why we will look at that as part of a fiscal event.
As part of a fiscal event, well, the fiscal event that's coming up next, as I say, is Wednesday the 11th of June. The spending review, Rachel Reeves looking through the books at the moment to see what they can afford and not afford. Unsurprisingly, Kemi Badenoch hit back at Keir Starmer. This is what she had to say at Prime Minister's Questions.
He promised to protect pensioners, but his winter fuel cut has driven thousands into hardship. His MPs hate this. He can't see them, but they all look sick just hearing what it is he's going to do. So let's wait until... Oh, yes, they're laughing. They're laughing. They are laughing just as they laughed at the budget. Hands up who here wanted winter fuel cuts. Hands up. Not a single one of them. Not a single one of them. The fact of the matter is, this Prime Minister is destroying them. They need to look at what they are doing to the country. The truth is, we all know that it is this Prime Minister, this Labour government, and their policies that are shafting the country, isn't it?
Well, let's see what you think about that. 0344 499 1000. I want to talk now to Lord Marland. He's a Conservative member of the House of Lords, former advisor to Boris Johnson, who we'll talk about in a second. Lord Marland, do you think this change in the winter fuel allowance that appears to be the case probably at the spending review is the right course of action, or do you think Keir Starmer is struggling to keep up with the public mood?
Well, I think it is his poll tax moment, isn't it, Peter, which you beautifully enunciated. They're in real trouble over this winter fuel allowance. Pensioners are fed up with it. And it was a real misstep in probably the worst honeymoon period I can ever remember for a government. And they're now paying quite a lot of catch up on some of the mismoves they've made. And as a pensioner myself, I'm delighted to have the winter fuel allowance. So I'm glad he's doing it.
Jonathan, it's interesting that he's had attacks from many, many sides on this, including Diane Abbott. This morning, she told Good Morning Britain it could be Keir Starmer's poll tax. And you know, Thatcher tried to drive through the poll tax and she was gone within the year. He's very good at being a manager, but being a politician has got to be something else. And it doesn't seem quite to have, he doesn't seem quite to have the something else. He's a manager rather than a politician. Do you agree with Diane Abbott?
I think he doesn't have the political antennae of many politicians. And I think that's manifested itself in a lot of the decisions that he's made. But to give him credit, he's doing extremely good things on the world stage. He's done a pretty good deal with India, which I've been reviewing recently. He's done a pretty good deal with the US, given that the US came and put a very bad deal at us, and we're still going to pay the price for it. And I think he's shown real leadership in Ukraine. But none of these count for anything when it comes to the British taxpayer and the British citizen. Your performance on the world stage is not something that registers with the British citizen. And he's going to have to pay a lot of catch up. We're the highest paid. We've got the highest tax we've had. We've now got inflation. I mean, goodness knows why the Bank of England reduced their interest rates, because we have got inflation and we're bound to have more inflation.
3.5%. Yeah, you spoke about the winter fuel allowance there, and you said you're glad it could come back for people like you who would receive it. I don't want to sort of make any assumptions about your income, but there are many. Let's just say there are many members of the House of Lords who may not necessarily need the winter fuel allowance.
I was being slight.
I know you were. I know you were.
Slightly facetious, Peter, as you know.
Of course, you're tongue in cheek, of course.
But I wouldn't claim it anyway.
But the point is that many people who don't need it would get it. Should it be means tested in some way, do you think?
I think I'm all in favour of means testing for it, yeah. Okay. I do think it's wrong that people like myself would have the opportunity to have it, without doubt.
Sure. Let's move on to the person who used to advise, Boris Johnson. He says that Britain is becoming a police state. This is after the verdict on Lucy Connolly. Her appeal failed. He says that Britain is losing its reputation for free speech, and he blasted the crazy and inhuman judgment, the lack of a successful appeal, a denied appeal for Lucy Connolly, who put a not very nice tweet out there and was jailed for 31 months for inciting racial hatred. Starmer's Britain, Boris Johnson says, is losing its reputation for free speech and turning into a police state where we must all learn to fear the knock on the door simply for something we say. What do you make of those comments?
Well, I think the police are behaving in an extraordinary way at the moment, and we saw those tweets that were made by the parents at the school where they were police. 4 or 5 policemen came around and arrested them. We've seen what's happened to Rupert Lowe, where 4 police cars came round to his house, having had a reasonable conversation with a constabulary. I mean, where I live in London, I haven't seen policemen for ages. I think that the problem here is there is a huge loss of confidence in the police, and if they keep this sort of heavy-handed, cack-handed approach to life, it will go immediately. So this is a big problem, and they behave with such heavy feet in minor circumstances, whereas major circumstances like knife crimes, like people having their wallets and watches stolen, that happened outside. Here just a couple of weeks ago, a gang came along and stole stuff from people just walking along the street, and they're never there for those sort of crimes. So I think there's a great loss of confidence in the police. We all want them to survive. We want them to be the bastion of security in this country. And they've got a lot of work to do to restore our confidence. You mentioned Rupert Lowe there, the independent MP formerly of Reform UK. He had a question actually about this particular issue, about Lucy Connolly, to the Prime Minister at Prime Minister's Questions today. Let's have a look at that.
Does the Prime Minister agree that imprisoning Lucy Connolly, a young mother with a 12-year-old daughter, for one foolish social media post, soon deleted, is clearly not an efficient or fair use of prison?
Mr. Speaker, sentencing is a matter for our courts, and I celebrate the fact that we have independent courts in this country. I am strongly in favour of free speech. We've had free speech in this country for a very long time, and we protect it fiercely. But I'm equally against incitement to violence against other people. And I will always support the action taken by our police and courts to keep our streets and people safe.
Is that a reasonable response from Keir Starmer?
Well, Peter, the irony is that they've just released a load of people from prison for breaking the law, and this is a very minor breach. And the amount of things that are put on Twitter, and various people have lost their high-profile people have lost their jobs recently for putting things on Twitter. I mean, it is a gross exaggeration by the courts in terms of justice. And he speaks with forked tongue, because he and his government have just allowed a load of prisoners to leave prison for much bigger crimes than that.
Just finally, Jonathan, I wonder if you could give me your opinion on Boris Johnson, because he's talking about a police state, but actually during lockdown many people would feel that the fact that people were in their homes 23 hours a day at various points was by itself a form of police state, and actually Boris Johnson doesn't have the moral authority to make those kind of remarks.
Well, I think they're totally different things, Peter, as you know. I mean, you're quite reasonable to ask the question, and of course people did suffer unreasonable hardship during that time. But that was a very serious pandemic where the whole world was in lockdown. I don't think Boris Johnson had any choice but to lock down the country and to impose the rules and regulations that were around that. I'm not suggesting that I don't think there's anything to do with the police state per se. It was a governmental decision to deal with a serious pandemic. This is a minor crime, and as I've said earlier, where the police seem to be being very heavy-handed on minor crimes and not dealing with the major crimes, which we're all suffering from.
Okay. Jonathan, thank you. That's Lord Marland there, Jonathan Marland, former advisor to Boris Johnson, member of the House of Lords. Of course, we're going to talk actually about this U-turn on the winter fuel allowance in just a second with the Director of Silver Voices and Reem Ibrahim as well, who is a spokeswoman for the Institute of Economic Affairs. Before I do that, I just want to get a thoughts of Stephen in Cambridge, who's given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Stephen, what do you make of the winter fuel announcement change from Keir Starmer? It seems to be on the way. Are you happy about that?
It's more smoke and mirrors, Peter. He's got wind of, well, he obviously knows that Angela Rayner sent that leaked email across to...
yeah, from page of the Daily Telegraph today, big scoop there about the fact that she wants more taxation of people who earn more money.
Is it 8 different taxes?
8 different taxes, that's what she wants,
so he's going to be giving you it with one hand, and she's going to have her hand in your back pocket taking it with the others.
Stay with me a second, Stephen. I just want to read out this message from Alison from Kent, who says, I think this useless government have realised that it costs more to means test the winter fuel payment than it did to pay everyone, and that's probably why they can afford to U-turn. The same reason they're unlikely to charge tax on savings interest for small amounts, as it costs more to collect and process than receive in revenue. Nick in Mansfield says, everyone says Keir Starmer is doing a U-turn on the heating allowance. Are you sure? He said it wanted more pensioners to be eligible. He could just be cutting pensions. I don't think he's going to be cutting pensions, but there's a lot of worry about this. There's uncertainty about this, Stephen. What do you think he's going to actually do?
Well, it'll be, like I say, he'll give it with one hand, and they'll find another way of taking it back with the other.
Well, we've got inflation of 3.5%, and food inflation will be a lot higher than that.
Well, the other thing is, if ever you get a Labour minister on or whatever, can you ask them to give us a date when all these savings that we're going to be making are going to come into effect?
It's a very, very good point. We did have a Labour minister on yesterday. We don't today, but the next time we do, Stephen, that's a very, very good question. We'll see. We'll try to remember to ask it.
Mike had one on this morning.
Yes.
All he wanted to talk about was upgrading the water and the sewerage infrastructure.
Yeah.
Well, can you, next time they're on, can you ask them how they're going to do it and stay within Ed Miliband's green agenda? Because everything that upgrades the infrastructure involves fossil fuels.
No, it's a very good point, Stephen. And Steve Reid was, in fairness, the Environment Secretary was on with Mike this morning. There are always far more questions than we have time to ask them, but that's another very, very good point. Brad in Cambridge says, did you notice the difference in tone when Starmer was responding to Rupert Lowe? It was far more measured and respectful than when he was responding to either Lee Anderson or Nigel Farage. It couldn't be because Lowe had his knife out for reform, could it? My enemy's enemy is my friend, etc., says Brad in Cambridge. Interesting thought on that one. Sean in Bridlington says, every single thing Starmer does and says makes me despise him more as each day passes. And Jane has been in touch to say, hi Peter, so how come they can afford the winter fuel allowance now? It was the first thing they announced. The damage has been done already. We'll talk more about that with opposing voices on this next here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Nick, who says, I can't believe you didn't challenge Lord Marland, Peter. Boris had no choice but to lock down Sweden. Yeah, look, certainly I've made my views very, very clear in regard to lockdown previously. I don't think they were needed in this way that they were done. I could have challenged him on that, I suppose, but there was a lot to talk about in that interview. But thank you anyway for your message. Sandy says, as a pensioner, Labour could promise me £1 million. I still wouldn't vote for them because I care more about our country than any amount of money, and I prefer dinner with an ugly and poor reform man than a handsome rich lefty if I was single. Which I'm not, says Sandy. Amy says, I think Starmer has done a U-turn on the winter fuel allowance because it was coming up on the doorstep of the recent elections, and also reform being ahead in the polls. So he thinks that he needs to do something and is hoping people's minds will change. Sue says, what an absolute slap in the face to veterans. The story you're talking about, demanding the commemorative flotilla of small boats divert to get out of the way of those invading our country. We're going to be talking about this a bit later on. This country is becoming a laughingstock. Whose decision was this? Name and shame. It was Border Force. I don't know who in Border Force, but certainly Rachel's texted me to say, with regard to the winter fuel U-turn, I'd be interested to know your view as to whether it is too little too late. Personally, I think the damage to their credibility is irreversible. Rachel, I think, we'll get on to our guest in a second, but my view on this is that the damage is done. A lot of people won't remember that it was given back, and it's only probably going to be given back to some people. I think they're going to means test it. It's a dog's dinner as a policy at the moment. They should have kept it as it was. It also only costs 1.4 billion, which sounds like a lot of money, but in the context of what we do as a country, 1.4 billion is very small. And thank you to Abbas, who has said, shut these genocide apologists down at talkTV like Peter Cardwell, straight down. At the end of the day, they are racist Islamophobes and live in an artificial life without an ounce of humanity and moral consciousness. Very happy Wednesday to you too. I can't be a genocide denier anyway, because genocide is not happening in Gaza. We will talk about the humanitarian crisis there later on. Dennis Reid is Director of Silver Voices, Voice for Pensioners, and Reem Abraham is a spokeswoman for the Institute of Economic Affairs. We're going to talk to them now about the winter fuel allowance. Let's just remind ourselves what the Prime Minister said earlier in Parliament.
As the economy improves, we want to make sure people feel those improvements in their days as their lives go forward. And that is why we want to ensure that as we go forward, more pensioners are eligible for winter fuel payments. As you would expect, Mr. Speaker, we will only make decisions we can afford. That is why we will look at that as part of a fiscal event.
And then Kemi Badenoch, of course, hit back at what he had to say.
He promised to protect pensioners, but his winter fuel cut has driven thousands into hardship. His MPs hate this. He can't see them, but they all look sick just hearing what it is he's going to do. So let's wait until... Oh, yes, they're laughing. They're laughing. They are laughing just as they laughed at the budget. Hands up who here wanted winter fuel cuts. Hands up. Not a single one of them. Not a single one of them. The fact of the matter is, this Prime Minister is destroying them. They need to look at what they are doing to the country. The truth is, we all know that it's this Prime Minister, this Labour government, and their policies that are shafting the country, isn't it?
Let's talk to Dennis Reid and Reem Abraham. Dennis, let me start with you. Are you welcoming this wholeheartedly or with caution?
Well, definitely with a lot of caution and a little dose of scepticism as well, Peter. Yes, it's welcome and it's justification for our long campaign on this issue. But we don't know whether it's going to be a screeching U-turn with a complete reversal of the policy, or just some minor fiddling around the edges, which won't be satisfactory at all. He had to do something. Because
do you think every single pensioner should get the winter fuel allowance?
Well, yes, I do. I do think that.
Even millionaire pensioners?
Universal benefit before. Now, the argument always is, and I've argued this out on your programme before, that a few millionaires don't need the money. Yes, but it's very difficult indeed. I agree with that. But it's very difficult indeed to actually have an assessment which rules out those millionaires.
Well, you're right, Dennis, and that means testing costs a lot of money. Reem, means testing is too expensive, surely, isn't it? And the full benefit for everybody, universal benefit, is the correct answer, is what Dennis is saying. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I do disagree. I think, look, fundamentally, a lot of pensioners have been going through incredible amounts of hardship, and it's really important that we have those serious conversations about why there has been that hardship in the first place, where we can reduce energy costs. And I think a lot of it is as a result of huge regulations around energy. I mean, net zero being a legally binding target in that way has put up energy costs for everyone. But the principle remains that if you are a millionaire, should you be in receipt of government benefits? And I think that the answer is no, and it can't ever be possibly yes. I understand.
Do you disagree with the winter fuel allowance in principle, Reem, as an idea?
Yes, because fundamentally it's giving cash handouts to people that do not need it. Now, many
of those people lots of cash handouts to people who do need it as well.
Look, I think that it means testing the winter fuel payments, which is effectively what would happen under this new scheme. So if you are already in receipt of pension credit or other benefits, I think we can increase the threshold. Right now, it's about £11,800 a year, if that's what your income is. I think we can definitely increase the threshold and talk about whether or not enough people are actually receiving pension credit. But fundamentally, the principle remains, not every benefit should be universal. And actually, if you are somebody like Alan Sugar, you are a millionaire, you should not be in receipt of government benefits. And fundamentally, we are paying the highest tax burden since the Second World War, huge amounts of money being spent. And actually, the tax burden is predicted to get even higher.
Reem's right, isn't she, Dennis? Reem is right in that the increasing the threshold and getting some element of means testing is actually not a bad idea, especially when the Alan Sugars of this world, and actually many people who earn an awful lot less money, who could in theory give it to charity but often don't, they don't need the winter fuel allowance, do they?
I don't agree with anything that Reem says, because her organisation doesn't agree with any pensioner benefits. It doesn't agree with the triple lock. I don't think it agrees with the state pension. So I take what she says.
Do you disagree with the state pension, Reem?
I think that there are better ways to reform it. I think the fact that pensioners are being given so little is as a result of the way that government have set up pension systems. I think that actually we should be looking towards a more private system. Countries like Singapore have done this really well, and it would mean that pensioners are lifted out of poverty. So
I think that's a bigger debate, and maybe we'll have that bigger debate on another occasion. But I want to let Dennis finish his point there.
Well, yes. I mean, the fact is that 10 million pensioners lost their winter fuel payment this winter. Millions of those actually struggled to pay their energy bills as a result of this. Millions of those people had to cut down on food. Millions of those people actually wore outdoor clothes indoors. Millions of those people cut down their social activities because of this callous policy. Now, the best way to resolve that cheaply, in the sense of not having means testing, administrative apparatus and so on, is to restore the payment in full. If they then want to come back later and have a discussion with us about, perhaps putting the means testing at the level of the higher rate of tax, for instance, that anybody above the higher...
Why not just sort it out now, Dennis? Why not just get it all done and dusted now, get it sorted out and with a permanent system so everybody knows where they are?
Well, yes, but we're talking about next winter. And the other worrying thing about the speech today...
There's plenty of time between now and next winter. The government can do things very quickly. They sorted out the Scunthorpe blast furnace in a day.
Look, the point I'm making is, you didn't let me finish, Keir Starmer said that he would announce the policy at the next fiscal event. The next fiscal event is the budget...
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's the spending review next month on the 11th of June, Dennis.
No, I'm afraid that that question was asked after the speech in Parliament, and it was clearly said he's talking about a fiscal event. The spending review is not a fiscal event in the same way. So time is short to do this. We can't revamp the whole policy, but we can restore the universal winter fuel payment for this winter, and that's the most important thing.
Reem, final word from you.
If I could just come back on that, where I do agree with Dennis is the timing of this. So when the cuts to winter fuel payments were made, they were so immediately before winter that actually I don't think many of those pensioners that were eligible for pension credit, they were eligible for that additional money, and they weren't able to be communicated that kind of policy idea. So a lot of them weren't able to receive the money they were entitled to. So Where I do agree with Dennis is that the timing has to be right. But the principle of means testing benefits, I think, has to always be upheld, because fundamentally it is unfair that people like myself are being taxed to the oblivion to give cash handouts to millionaires. I'm sorry, but I can't ever see a system in which that is fair.
Final word from Dennis.
You can't justify a policy which penalises 10 million pensioners on the basis of a few millionaires who maybe shouldn't.
25% of pensioners are millionaires, Dennis. You know that.
That's rubbish, and I've argued that before. It's absolute rubbish what you are talking, and that is generally true.
Look it up. It's true.
It's an extremist organisation, the IEA.
I don't think they're extremists. I don't think we're going to get into that kind of language. Dennis, thank you very, very much indeed for your thoughts. Dennis Reid there, Director of Silver Voices, and Reem Abraham, who's a spokeswoman for the Institute of Economic Affairs, which is not an extremist organisation. Dennis is factually wrong there, I'm afraid. Thank you to both of them. What do you think of this? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you everybody who has been in touch, including Brad, who says perhaps the winter fuel allowance should be the same as child benefit, available for any pensioner earning under £60,000 a year. There are many parents who don't need that either. Brian says instead of cuts by idiots, Labour needs an actual brain to get an economy flowing in sufficient weight for the tax take to be sufficient to cover our costs. Poor pay more tax by spending, the poor pay the most tax, sorry, by spending all their income. The rich pay less tax because they spend very little of their income, says Brian. Richard says, I think Labour will give the winter fuel allowance to basic rate taxpayers, but it won't help the Labour vote. There are just too many bad actions taken by this government. Starmer is absolutely hated by 85% of voters, says Richard. Well, I don't know where Richard's getting that statistic from, but there's certainly lots of people who don't like him. Mark in Washington says, I don't understand why there's so much negativity towards Starmer doing a U-turn on the fuel allowance. He got so much criticism for implementing it, but equally as much for reneging on it. Make your minds up, says Mark in Washington. Well, we still don't know, Mark, what this actually looks like, and until we get the more detail, and I disagree with Dennis Reid, I think it will come out at the spending review. They can't just wait until the budget. The spending review is a fiscal event. It is a fiscal event. Right then, something else that happened in Parliament yesterday was the Foreign Secretary David Lammy talking about the government's position on Israel. This is what he said.
Netanyahu's government is planning to drive Gazans from their homes into a corner of the Strip to the south and permit them a fraction of the aid that they need. Yesterday, Minister Smodrick even spoke of Israeli forces cleansing Gaza, destroying what's left of residents, Palestinians, being relocated, he said, to third countries. We must call this what it is. It is extremism. It is dangerous. It is repellent. It is monstrous, and I condemn it in the strongest possible terms.
The Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, speaking yesterday in Parliament. Of course, one of his ministers, Hamish Falconer, who is a Foreign Office Minister, summoned the Israeli ambassador, Tzipi Hosavelli, to the Foreign Office yesterday to give her a dressing down and to say that the trade talks that were happening between the United Kingdom and Israel were being suspended. Now, I am probably one of the biggest supporters of Israel that you can come across. I absolutely support the right of Israel to exist. I love its people. I've been there. It's a wonderful country. I think its people have been through a horrendous amount, not just historically, but of course in the last couple of years after the 7th of October massacre. Horrendous things happened then by Hamas. I would honestly ask, and I often ask people who are critics of Israel, what would you do about Hamas? How would you eradicate Hamas? How would you stop the threat from Hamas? And that is a very, very big problem, but it is becoming increasingly difficult for people like me to defend the actions of Israel. There's a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. There's no doubt about that. Not enough aid is getting in. And I want to talk to the former Israeli government spokesman, Elon Levy, about that. Elon, I want to get your reaction, certainly. First of all, thank you for joining me. I want to get your reaction certainly to what David Lammy was saying. But first of all, I want you to help me. What would you say to people like me who, and many of our viewers and listeners actually, who are supportive of the Israeli people, no doubt about that, but they see what is happening in Gaza at the moment and they can't support the Israeli government's plan of action or inaction in terms of what is happening?
Peter, there is no doubt that the situation in Gaza is miserable because war is hell. And as I've been saying since the beginning, this is a war that Israel didn't start, it didn't want, it didn't expect. But by Jove, it's a war that Israel has to win. And it has to win because otherwise there will be a next time, because we're fighting against a jihadi death cult whose stated reason for existing is to continue waging jihad against Israel until we're all dead. So Israelis understand if this isn't the last Gaza war, there will be a next Gaza war. Now, I know people in Britain celebrated just a few weeks ago VE Day, a great celebration of total victory over Nazi Germany in Europe, which it inflicted a terrible price on German civilians. I mean, the British Army was not kind and gentle, and this didn't happen with kid gloves. But there is now peace on the continent, and Germany is a prosperous democratic country because that evil regime, the Nazis, were totally destroyed. And Britain is proud of what it did then. War is hell. No one says that war is pretty. But Britain is proud that it managed to defeat that evil regime and turn the leaf for a new future. And Israel is hoping that when the Hamas regime falls and the military threat of a jihadi terrorist group from the Gaza Strip falls as well, then we'll be able to turn a new leaf and hopefully begin to see a path to peace in our region.
But you know and I know, Elon, that it's not 80 years ago. There are many ways, and this is not a symmetric war, this is an asymmetric war between a state and between a jihadi murderous organisation that doesn't exist in the same way as a state exists, the state of Germany previously. The parallel, I get it, and I understand why you're saying it, and war is very unpretty, but the surgical nature of these things can be done better than having women, children, innocent men as well, some of whom are actually standing up against Hamas, suffering, not having enough food. Israel could, right this moment, put the aid in that needs to go in to Gaza. Why is it not doing that? Why is this blockade, to some extent, continuing?
Yeah, and it's so important you mentioned the Gazans who are bravely standing up against Hamas because they
not enough coverage in the not enough coverage in the media of those.
No,
we're giving them coverage.
Ignored and let down by the mainstream media. They understand what protesters in London don't understand, which is that Hamas brought this misfortune on them. This war could end immediately if Hamas surrenders and frees the hostages. You're right as well when you note that this is an asymmetric war. Hamas is, I mean, it's the government of Gaza, it's the regime there. Hamas is to Gaza what the Taliban is to Afghanistan. And it's not fighting with tanks on the battlefield, it's fighting by hiding under schools, and under homes and under hospitals in a network of tunnels longer than the London Underground. And that explains the destruction you see in Gaza, because the enemy has literally been fighting from underneath civilian buildings. And now another one of the challenges you mentioned is aid. Now, it is important that aid reach the people who need it while making sure the terrorists can't steal it. Unfortunately, the existing UN mechanism is broken. It has been exploited by Hamas in order to finance its war machine. Hamas has been able to hijack trucks, tax the goods, sell them on the black market, and use the money, the food donated by British taxpayers, to pay the fighters who are starving the hostages. This has been quite literally prolonging the war. So what Israel is saying now is it backs a US initiative to get aid directly to the people who need it. Private US contractors will set up distribution centers where civilians can come and get rations and get the food they need without any risk of Hamas intercepting the food along the way. Because in order to get to a day when Hamas falls and this war ends, it needs to be starved of its cash. And in order to starve it of its cash, it needs to be cut off from the corrupt UN system that it has exploited in order to steal food donated by the British taxpayer.
I also completely agree with you in the very, very lazy assumption that the United Nations is the solution to all problems. UNRWA was a disgraceful and is a disgraceful organisation that had its members were actually members of a number of its members, about a dozen of them at least, were members of Hamas who took part in the 7th of October. To go back to Israel and to go back to the Israeli government, do you honestly believe what they're doing at the moment is bringing a state of affairs where Hamas is defeated, if it indeed can be defeated, and the hostages are coming back? Do you think we're closer to that because of the Israeli government strategy? The UK government certainly doesn't think that.
Well, it's funny that the UK government doesn't think that, because Israel's military strategy is based on the UK's own strategy against ISIS in Mosul. I mean, let's go down memory lane. Over 10 years ago, Islamic State captured huge swathes of territory in Syria and Iraq, and the UK was part of an international coalition that rained hellfire on ISIS. What they did was they moved civilians out of harm's way. They encouraged civilians to get out of Mosul. And then when the terrorists weren't able to use civilians as human shields, the UK lent air support, the Iraqi forces went in. And if you look at images of Mosul, I mean, they look like Gaza now or Dresden 80 years ago. Israel's strategy has not been working because it's been going into Gaza, fighting Hamas, withdrawing, and then Hamas keeps going back into the areas that Israel fought in. Soldiers are going into the same places 4 or 5 times. It's a game of cat and mouse. So Israel's strategy now is based on saying, we're pushing into the Gaza Strip, we're going to claim territory from Hamas, and we're going to keep it until Hamas falls. And as for the hostages, at least 23 hostages still alive, starving, being tortured, literally tortured in underground dungeons in Gaza. Israel hopes that military pressure is going to force Hamas to agree to release hostages in exchange for a pause in the fighting. It's a very risky gamble, but the alternative is to pay the ransom that Hamas is demanding. And this Israeli government, and there is a fierce debate in Israel, and I'm happy to get into this, this Israeli government has decided we can't afford to pay the ransom that Hamas is demanding.
Smotrich is someone who has not been helpful here. We heard him, the finance minister, we heard him being quoted by David Lammy there, and relations between a key ally of Israel in the United Kingdom. Those relations are really, really bad at the moment. Your ambassador, CP Ottaveli, was called to the Foreign Office yesterday. You can see why the UK is doing this, can't you?
Well, the UK has decided that it's happy for this war to end with Hamas still in power.
I'm not sure that's a fair characterisation.
Well, you know, happy may be pushing it, but the UK is content for this war to end with Hamas in power. Mr. Lammy can say all he likes, that he insists that Hamas can have no role in the governance of Gaza, but it doesn't matter how much he bangs on the dispatch box. Hamas isn't going to remove itself from power. The only thing that is going to remove Hamas from power is a military operation, just like ISIS wasn't going to resign peacefully and had to be pushed out by the might of the British Army and an international coalition. Britain has decided, whether because of political pressure at home, the massive protests we've seen in London, or whatever other reasons, that it can live with an end of the war in which Hamas remains in power.
It's had that pressure for 18 months plus. It's had that pressure for a very long time for many people in the Labour Party. You'll know as well as I do that its stated position is that it wants a two-state solution. It has people on the left within it who will be pushing for the Palestinian cause to be supported more than the Israeli cause. But we've got to this stage now, and my view of this, and feel free to disagree, but when you have America on the brink, when you have the UK calling in the ambassador and saying trade talks, whether they were worthwhile or not, I don't know, but that they've been suspended. This is a stage further, isn't it? Israel is becoming more isolated.
And that is why Hamas is praising the UK. Hamas has praised the UK, France and Canada for the latest pressure against Israel. I don't know who the last British Foreign Secretary was who was praised by a jihadi regime, but it's a terrible indictment, I think, of British diplomacy. Now, the reason that Hamas is praising David Lammy is that it thinks Lammy has thrown it a lifeline. Hamas wants to end this war in power. Hamas wants to end this war still governing Gaza, still oppressing its people, diverting aid in order to build more tunnels, to rebuild its missile arsenal, in order to resume war against Israel at a time that it sees fit. And Israelis want to defeat Hamas because we don't want more war. Peter, we've got guys my age who've been in reserves for over 500 days now. They have jobs, academic degrees, wives. They've been in reserves for 500 days. They want to go home. But they understand that if they go home before Hamas is removed from power, then the next war is only a matter of time. And it's Israelis who are going to be fighting it, not people in Britain. So I think the British government has decided, for its own reasons, and that's legitimate, that it can live with this war ending, with Hamas still in power in Gaza. But when Gaza is just down the road from anywhere in Israel, when you can see it from the kibbutzim where people were slaughtered on October 7th, Israel says the only way this war can end is with Hamas removed from power. And right at the beginning of the war, the UK understood it. Canada is one of the countries now joining the pressure against Israel. I remember when Canada said that it wants a sustainable ceasefire, and said a ceasefire can only be sustainable if Hamas is removed from power. Britain understands that a ceasefire cannot be sustainable if Hamas remains in power to plot the next October 7th massacre, more missiles against Israel, more hostage-taking crises. That's why the demand we need to hear from Britain, and especially from people who want this war to end like I do, Hamas has to surrender, lay down your weapons, go into exile, release the hostages, and the war that Hamas started on October 7th can end tomorrow.
Elon, thank you for that. I really learn an awful lot from your Twitter as well, by the way. Thank you for joining us on Talk today. Really appreciate that. That is Elon Levy, who is a former Israeli government spokesman. What do you think of what he said there? Do you agree with him? Or have things got to a point where your support for Israel is perhaps waning? Maybe you didn't support them in the first place. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk in just a second about a small boat migrant's dog who's been looked after by you, your money, taxpayers' money, at a cost of thousands of pounds. And that story I mentioned a bit earlier about the migrant boat forcing the Dunkirk commemorative flotilla to divert. Britain 2025. Stay with us here on Talk.
we've secured £104 billion with a B, £1 billion worth of investment, private sector investment, to fix all of those sewers. That's the biggest amount of money, by the way, ever in history invested in our water sector.
And who's going to fix the pipes? Have we got a load of people sitting around who know how to fix pipes that aren't currently employed?
Well, that's why we're setting up a new training academy to make sure that we can get British people who are currently not working, train them up and get them to work doing that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch, including on the winter fuel allowance. Lots of people ringing. We'll get to those calls as soon as we can. And indeed sending us voice notes. You can do it through WhatsApp on 0344 499 1000. Alan first, please.
Keir Starmer doing a U-turn on his winter fuel payments is never going to work in getting back the public trust. It's no different than if I was to nick someone's stuff, someone's handbag or something, and then 9 months later give it them back and say, well, now I've given you your stuff back, you can trust me again. They're never going to trust you, and they're never going to trust Starmer again. So good luck to him, but I don't think people are going to forget this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Alan. Trust is a bit like virginity. It doesn't come back. Dave, on winter fuel?
Why can't they just reinstate it for everyone, and then it just gets declared as income on some millionaire's tax return, and it just gets taken off them again, like any other income would? That structure's already there to allow for being taxed on income. So it kind of just passed through the books like it never happened. Would that not be a way to do it?
It's a good point. Lots of reaction to Elon Levy's interview as well, the former Israeli government spokesman we spoke to just before the break there, Graham and Bush. He says if Israel stops its bombardment for the next 30 days and lets aid in, and Hamas doesn't release the remaining hostages in those 30 days, then what? The answer is I don't know. Graham, I'd love to be able to solve the Middle East, but unfortunately I can't. Leslie says, I totally agree with Elon. For Lamy to be thanked by Hamas is a disgraceful indictment on this government. Right then, let's talk about two stories, one, both of which have equally appalled me. One is the front page of The Sun today about a small boat migrant's dog, a German Shepherd, being looked after for 4 months, costing you thousands. Even to feed a dog for a month costs about £200. What's that? Oh yeah, the cost of a winter fuel allowance for some people. So there's so much money going to this dog, for goodness sake. And then we have another story as well about the migrant boat forcing a Dunkirk commemorative flotilla to divert. Yes, really, this is just astonishing. This is a flotilla of little ships crossing the English Channel to commemorate the Dunkirk evacuation, forced to divert so Border Force could escort a migrant boat. This is the 85th anniversary of Operation Dynamo. 66 boats setting sail from Kent to Dunkirk at 6 o'clock this morning, and they were intended, of course, as a poignant tribute to the bravery and sacrifice of the Dunkirk evacuations. 1,000 British pleasure boats at that stage were used in the rescue of more than 300,000 Allied soldiers from the Nazi advance. But the commemorations earlier today were disrupted when Border Force and the French Navy demanded that the flotilla be diverted to provide a 1 nautical mile exclusion zone for, guess what, a migrant boat. Let's speak to Lucy White, who is a public policy specialist at the Centre for Migration Control. Lucy, where to start with this? Well, let's start with the Dunkirk flotilla. It says everything, doesn't it?
Yes, I mean, first of all, it's great to be here on talkTV, and yeah, it's just astounding. It's every single day, it's just some new nonsense that's happening. I mean, the point is these migrant boats should not be there in the first place, and they certainly should not disrupt an event such as this to commemorate the flotilla. It's absolutely astounding.
Yeah, one observer said they've asked the British ships to get out of the way. It is one of the most important days in history, and they're shoving them out of the way. My question is, why is a migrant boat containing people who are coming to this country illegally, why is that given priority by Border Force and by the French over the commemorative boats? That's my question. A priority was given, a decision was made here, wasn't it, Lucy?
Yes, well, I think it's because recently, perhaps yesterday, 2 migrants died and now they're taking extra caution. But as I said, they shouldn't be there in the first place. They take that risk when they cross the channels. And if they want to take that risk, that's their decision. It certainly shouldn't involve us having to divert such a historic event. And again, this is just a slap in the face of British history, which everyone seems to think doesn't matter anymore.
And the German Shepherd, your view on that? The fact we're spending thousands of pounds getting it in quarantine. Clearly we can't even turn back a dog, never mind the many illegal migrants who land on our shores.
Well, all I have to say is I'm actually quite impressed that they've actually understood the need to quarantine. I just wish instead of quarantine the dog, they will quarantine the illegal migrants. What they should be doing with these illegal migrants is detaining them and deporting them. This German Shepherd will be quarantined for 4 months, which means it will be detained for 4 months. Why don't we do the same with these illegal migrants instead of allowing them to enter our country unvetted? And moreover, we need to be doing...
The German Shepherd will certainly be vetted.
Yes, and we should be doing that with the illegal migrants as well.
OK, thank you for your thoughts there. That's Lucy White, who's a public policy specialist at the Centre for Migration Control. What do you think about this? Not just about the dog, thousands of pounds of your money spent to put it in quarantine. What do you think about that? What do you think about the fact that this flotilla... Honestly, I saw this story this afternoon and I was just absolutely astonished. A flotilla of little ships crossing the English Channel to commemorate the Dunkirk evacuation, forced to divert so Border Force could escort a migrant boat. Marine traffic audio heard by the Telegraph revealed that the little ships were told there is a French warship on our head with a migrant boat close by and we've been requested to give 1 nautical mile distance from that vessel. Over. A French voice, believed to be from the French Navy, was then heard saying, "Thank you, sir, thank you very much." Just astonishing. Association of Dunkirk Little Ships, which organised the voyage, said it would ensure the legacy of the Dunkirk Little Ships continues to inspire future generations. It's the first crossing the little ships have made the journey since 2015. They should have been completely unimpeded. Instead, they were impeded by what? They were impeded by a migrant boat. The little ships were volunteered or requisitioned by the government. We remember, of course, to be used in the evacuations and crewed predominantly by Royal Navy personnel. Soldiers from Britain, the Empire, from France, Belgium, Poland and the Netherlands were evacuated across the Channel, and the operation prompted Winston Churchill's "We will fight on the beaches" speech in the House of Commons as the evacuation was completed on the 4th of June 1940, 85 years ago. Lots of people getting in touch about all sorts of issues, including Sally, who says, surely it's so much easier and cheaper to give the winter fuel allowance to all pensioners. Higher rate taxpayers will give 40% of it, basically saying, do you know what, I can't deal with all of this nonsense anymore, and storming out. Terry in Manchester says, please tell Reem that paying the free migrant hotels all over the country is where her tax is going. Graham says, on the winter fuel allowance, will Starmer U-turn on his U-turn? Leslie says, there's a difference between Boris and the lockdown and being jailed for a tweet. What a silly thing to compare. Well, I don't think it's silly to compare, Leslie, to be honest. I mean, Boris Johnson is talking about a police state. What was it during lockdown when people were told they couldn't leave their homes for 23 hours a day? I think that's a police state as well. Yes, it's a different thing, but it's a worthwhile question. Phil in Thurrock says the dog should have been put down on sight. Well, Phil, I'm an animal lover and I don't want dogs to be put down necessarily, but I'm also not sure that was a particularly good use of money. We'll talk more about all these issues in the next hour. I want to hear from you too. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good evening, this is Talk Drive. I really appreciate your company. Thank you for joining me, whether you're listening at home, whether you are in the car or your van, or whether you are out and about, whatever you're up to. Thank you so much for your company this Wednesday evening. It's been a very busy day of news. We're going to get through all of it. First of all, the huge U-turn from Keir Starmer on winter fuel allowances. He basically admits that he's got it wrong. Kemi Badenoch came gunning for him. Certainly she wasn't happy either. Our Prime Minister's questions a little bit earlier on this afternoon. Israel remains a huge topic as well. The Foreign Secretary not happy about their actions in the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Boris Johnson warning Starmer's Britain turning into a police state. This was which was prompted by Lucy Connolly losing her appeal. We also had a question again on Prime Minister's questions today from Rupert Lowe, the independent MP, formerly of Reform. We'll take a look at that as well. We'll go through all of this with the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator, James Heal, in a second. We'll get a preview of the big match tonight, Spurs versus Man United in Bilbao, and as well we'll talk about whether you're more likely to swipe right for a righty. Apparently Reform UK people who go on, supporters who go on dating apps are more likely to get a date. Would you rather date a righty or a lefty? Are you more likely to go out with someone or to go on a date with someone if they have right-wing politics? Let me know your thoughts on that too. 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7, and of course you can get in touch on text 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number does 3 things. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please, send that on 0344 499 1000. That's the number for WhatsApp text messages as well, and to give me a ring. Lots to discuss between now and 7. Let's get started here on Talk. Well, thank you to Neil, who says, regarding the German Shepherd coming over in the boat, what if it was a cat? Would you be more supportive? It's not that I'm not supportive of it. It's not the animal's fault. They shouldn't be brought over in a boat anyway. That is a totally unsafe way to bring either a small boat, either a human being or an animal, certainly. And the fact that the German Shepherd is being quarantined and paid for by you, it shouldn't have been there in the first place. I'm not blaming the animal necessarily, Neil, certainly, but there we are. Amanda says, priority for illegal immigrants over Dunkirk little ships. It is an absolute outrage. How much worse can it get? Lucy in Cornwall says a diversion is despicable. I'm not bothered. The dog is being cared for. I hope it doesn't go back to the illegal migrant. John says illegal migrants bringing a dog, that's 2 offences. Illegal entry plus bringing an undocumented and unvaccinated dog. A passport is now required. Unbelievable, says John. Jane says the dog story is the final straw. The country has gone to the dogs, says Jane. Lots of people feel that way. Let's talk about Keir Starmer now, because earlier the Prime Minister made this announcement in the House of Commons about a big controversial issue. We've talked about it many, many times in this programme. Now the Prime Minister may well be changing his mind. This is what Keir Starmer said in the House of Commons earlier today.
As the economy improves, we want to make sure people feel those improvements in their days as their lives go forward. And that is why we want to ensure that as we go forward, more pensioners are eligible for winter fuel payments. As you would expect, Mr. Speaker, we will only make decisions we can afford. That is why we will look at that as part of a fiscal event.
That was Keir Starmer in the House of Commons today. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, of course, she gets her right of reply at Prime Minister's questions. This is part of what she had to say about the issue.
He promised to protect pensioners, but his winter fuel cut has driven thousands into hardship. His MPs hate this. He can't see them, but they all look sick just hearing what it is he's going to do. So let's wait until... Oh, yes, they're laughing. They're laughing. They are laughing just as they laughed at the budget. Hands up who here wanted winter fuel cuts. Hands up. Not a single one of them. Not a single one of them. The fact of the matter is, this Prime Minister is destroying them. They need to look at what they are doing to the country. The truth is, we all know that it's this Prime Minister, this Labour government, and their policies that are shafting the country, isn't it?
That's what Kemi Badenoch had to say about the issue. Let's speak to James Heal. He is the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. James, thanks for joining us this evening, and it's a pleasure to have you on the programme. This is a major thing. There's a really major U-turn for Keir Starmer. Has he finally got the message of so many people annoyed with him?
Belatedly, yes, he has got that message, Peter, and this was one of the most unpopular decisions this government made, if not the most unpopular. It polled through the floor. It's something that Labour MPs are very concerned about, and it was something that came up a lot in that Runcorn by-election where, of course, Reform took one of Labour's top 50 safest seats.
Yes, certainly, and that is something that many people will have thought about at that time. Interesting, Diane Abbott saying on Good Morning Britain this morning that this was his poll tax moment. That's not just you or me saying that, James. That's an influential Labour MP.
Yes, and I mean, I think Diane Abbott there is, although she's a bit of a sort of known foe of the Starmer leadership, she is also speaking in terms that a lot of Labour MPs were saying privately. And there's 2 reasons for that, I think. First of all is just actually in terms of the kind of symbolic importance of this policy. Of course, remember the poll tax was introduced by Margaret Thatcher. She refused to change it. She went. And then a year later, of course, John Major came in and scrapped the whole thing. And they had a whole system of, local government finance was changed as a result of that. I think the same thing's happening here, where basically the whole policy's gone. Keir Starmer hasn't, but they've changed the whole policy and they'll completely U-turn on that. And the second reason I think why that analogy sort of works in one sense is really because it came to be emblematic of a lot of the government's failings. And I think what this government has unfortunately got a habit of doing from their perspective is picking certainly high visible targets in society. So, there's a line from The Economist, which is never go after a profession that's depicted in a children's picture book. So first it was the farmers, then it was the fishermen. I think the elderly is another example perhaps of that. And the danger is, of course, with that is because of their fiscal rules and fiscal constraints, it means that they have to find taxes and tax increases where they can, rather than, say, for instance, going for the big bang option of 1% increase in income tax.
Speaking of taxes, we know that there is this row, front page of the Telegraph today, that Angela Rayner has been talking about. The paper says Rayner's secret plan to tax savers, a leaked memo revealing the split at the heart of the government. Just take us through that story, James.
Yeah, so this is the memo that was sent a couple of months ago by the Deputy Prime Minister to the Chancellor with a series of 8 different policy suggestions. And it was all things like such as, raid super wealthy pensioners in terms of their savings, look at capital gains tax, all that kind of stuff. So things that would technically not breach the spirit of Labour or the wording of the Labour manifesto promises. But also it's been leaked now a month or so before the comprehensive spending review on the 11th of June. And now this is all being spun within government a sense of one of 2 things. Either Team Rayner leaked it, and it was an example of sort of positioning ahead perhaps of an attempt to try and sort of butter up the party's soft left Or the second thing, perhaps, was even more duplicitous, was it someone in the Treasury elite this to try and embarrass the Deputy Prime Minister? So really, there's people pointing fingers. The one thing you can conclude, Peter, is that there is a massive gulf at the heart of government. We know there's been reports about tensions at the cabinet table, meetings and arguments, etc., about borrowing rules. Clearly, a lot of people are unhappy about the way things are going, and if I were Rachel Reeves, I'd be worried.
Yes, I think she probably should be, and maybe the winter fuel allowance part is sort of part of this as well. That we're hearing that, or certainly Keir Starmer said, it will happen at a fiscal event. When do you think the change in winter fuel actually will happen? Is it the spending review? Will it just have to wait to the budget? When do you think it'll be?
So I think it's going to be initially. My initial reaction was I thought it was going to be the spending review, but I think actually, from talking to Number 10, the suggestion is it's going to be at the budget. Now, of course, the budget last year was 30th of October. If we have something similar this time, you're going to start getting into the winter months, particularly if, say, for instance, you're in Scotland. So I think some of those MPs who've been pushing for this, saying, "Hang on a sec, can we bring this in sooner? Is there any way of doing this?" Because we're going to be the winter months, and then, of course, the pain carries on for another year, and a lot of Scottish MSPs and the Welsh MSs as well. Are the ones pressuring their colleagues in Westminster, and they're saying, look, we've got elections next year, we need to get this done.
Especially with those elections coming up. I want to talk to you as well about what Rupert Lowe said in regard to Lucy Connolly at Prime Minister's Questions. Let's just play this clip. This is Rupert Lowe, former Reform UK MP, now an independent. This is the point he made to the Prime Minister at Prime Minister's Questions at lunchtime today.
Does the Prime Minister agree that imprisoning Lucy Connolly, a young mother with a 12-year-old daughter, for one foolish social media post, soon deleted, is clearly not an efficient or fair use of prison?
Mr. Speaker, sentencing is a matter for our courts, and I celebrate the fact that we have independent courts in this country. I am strongly in favour of free speech. We've had free speech in this country for a very long time, and we protect it fiercely. But I'm equally against incitement to violence against other people. And I will always support the action taken by our police and courts to keep our streets and people safe.
The Prime Minister replying to Rupert Lowe there. This is a row that really, really annoys a lot of our viewers and listeners, James. Nothing's going to change, as we know, because her appeal has been denied. But again, when it comes to this free speech, when it comes to this idea, not that I'm defending what Lucy Connolly said at all, but my position has always been that she should have got a slap on the wrist, something like a caution to say, look, this is illegal, you shouldn't do it. But being in prison for such a long time, still something annoying many, many people.
Yes, certainly. And of course, what gives this added impetus, Peter, is not just that sentencing and the review of her time in jail, but also, of course, what Labour's doing currently in terms of its justice reforms. And right now, at the beginning of this government, of course, there were a number of prisoners let out early under an early release scheme that was to ease overcrowding. Tomorrow, we're expecting the Gawk review. My understanding is that that's going to recommend, much more reduced sentences for those who make crimes for less than a year. I think that's been reported as well. And as a result of that, of course, you therefore get things like, hang about serial shoplifters, people who potentially commit minor crimes or minor violent crimes, etc. There needs to be...
Well, you're absolutely right, James. And the point is as well that there are so many times when people who are, for example, shoplifters are given chance after chance after chance after chance. And actually a custodial sentence for something like shoplifting often only happens when you've got maybe 150, 200 convictions for that. So those short sentences, which, look, I agree short sentences are basically pointless in terms of a deterrent effect. I think they're pointless in terms of rehabilitation. But there has to come a point where someone goes to prison and is deprived of their liberty. So this is probably going to be another political round. And David Gawk, of course, was a Conservative Justice Secretary, but very much on the left of the Conservatives.
Yeah, massively. You sum it up perfectly, Peter. And of course, what it's going to be so striking is the fact that this was a prison sentence of more than 2 years. And so that's what's really so jarring, I think, for people is that, look, we can understand tough justice, we can understand soft justice, but what the people will be saying online is, this was someone who wasn't a repeat offender. They sent out a moronic tweet and they deleted it quickly. So I think there'll be that sense of it. But I think that politically, the two-tier narrative is so weaponized against the government and is so potentially fatal for them that I think that it's going to be something that people like Rupert Lowe, a lot of the Tories like Robert Jenrick, they're going to keep on talking about.
Boris Johnson talking about it too, James.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And of course, it's very striking, isn't it? Boris Johnson's return the last couple of days.
What a coincidence.
Yeah, so on Monday he was obviously raiding against, I think it was sort of, the Gimp of Brussels, Keir Starmer or something like that, sort of arresting imagery by the blonde bombshell
Images for which he should be arrested, I would argue.
Absolutely, crime. I mean, that's the real thought crime.
That's the real thought crime. The front page. You saw the front page of the Daily Star. Don't look it up, folks. Don't look it up.
Yeah, well, this is still for the watershed. And then, of course, another splash today. And I think, it's Boris Johnson really just sort of testing the waters. He loves making a bit of a fuss. He's a very fine penman himself. So we'll wait to see in terms of what it means. But I mean, I do think this point, you were talking about this earlier, Peter, about, Boris Johnson, of course, was the one with COVID. He was incredibly authoritarian in office. He, of course, was the one who signed up to the fishing deal, albeit for 4 years rather than 12 years. So it's a classic thing of, who brought all this stuff in, and actually it turns out Boris was responsible for a fair amount of it.
James, just before you go, let me devastate the housewives of Britain by informing them that you are not single. But if you were, would you be swiping right to a Reform voter rather than a Tory? You've seen this story, I would imagine.
I have, yeah. I tweeted it yesterday in the Mail. I thought, put it out that on a poster. Britain needs reform, and you can get them too on your dating app. Genuinely. I mean, I used to be on Hinge. That's the popular dating app for the housewives of Britain there, and they have liberal, moderate, and I think conservative, not political party, but I don't know. I mean, I think I recall that UKIP. Voters used to poll about 10 years ago was incredibly good lovers. So I don't know. I mean, I've only got one person, but I'd be interested to see if anyone goes out there and does a sort of political focus group in terms of dating experiences.
Swipe right on the right wingers. It'll be very interesting. Yes, James, thank you very much indeed. That's James Heal there, who is Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. Let's take a couple of calls. Jody is in Essex and wants to talk about the winter fuel allowance. Jody, what do you make of what Starmer said today? You're very welcome to the programme.
Hello, pleased to talk to you. Anyway, I just feel like saying I've worked since I was 14. I've paid into the system all these years, but I'm still not entitled to it. It's not an entitlement, it's what I'm due. I get so annoyed because there's so many pensioners that need the money. I mean, I don't particularly need it, but I earned it before paying into the system.
But if the government says you actually don't deserve it, I mean, I disagree with them. But if they say you have over a certain amount of money, or your income is a certain amount of money, I mean, I don't know what your personal circumstances are, Judy, and I'm not asking, but do you think there should be some level of means testing with this?
No, I don't, because people only get money for working all their life and working bloody hard. And if they're paid into the system, they're due for it. And if what they want to do with it, it's entirely up to them.
Does Alan Sugar need a winter fuel allowance?
Well, he can do what he wants with it. He's entitled to it. He's worked all his life for it, and he's worked bloody hard for it. He's only got that position because he's worked for it. So many people get it that have never worked. And I used to work in the East End of London, and there's people that never ever worked, and they're getting it because they didn't work and got no money.
Yeah.
I worked hard. I'm a widow now. My husband paid into it. I paid into it. And we're not entitled to it because we've saved up a bit of money all our life. And that's how strong I feel.
What would it mean to you to get it back, Judy?
Well, I feel as though I've done something wrong. I just feel as though I'm not in... I don't know.
But if you got it back, Judy, if it comes back next winter, would that be a really positive thing for you?
Well, it would be a positive thing, but I still want both Labour.
Yeah. Well, the damage is done politically, isn't it, Judy?
Oh, totally. I mean, I know so many people of my age. Our age vote. Most of our age vote. But people will not... All my friends will never vote Labour again.
Do you know what, Judy? Just it's interesting. Someone's been in touch just literally in the last minute to say, hi, Peter, let's not forget the majority of Labour MPs voted for the cut in winter fuel allowance. No way will they be trusted again. Do you feel that way, Judy?
I'd never trust them again. I wouldn't trust them with my shopping list.
Yeah.
I wouldn't trust them with anything. I mean, I rent my house out because I couldn't afford to live in it, so I'm getting a nice little income. But I worked for that house. No one gave it to me.
Yeah.
I didn't get a council house and let the government pay for it. I worked for that. I worked bloody hard. I went through cancer. I went through bringing up 2 kids on my own. Never asked for a penny. But now... because I've worked hard like that all my life, I'm not entitled to it, which I've paid in for it. It's not about the money, it's about the principle of it all.
It's the fairness of it, isn't it, Judy?
It is the fairness of it all. I'm being penalised for working all my life.
Judy, great call. Thanks for ringing me. I really appreciate it, and I wish you well. Thank you, Judy. It's Judy in Essex there. Darren's in Surrey and wants to talk about Lucy Connolly.
Hi, Peter.
Hi, Darren.
Hi. So this has been troubling since I was listening to your show yesterday, and you were talking to, I don't know if he was a journalist or he was an expert on the judiciary and sentencing and everything else. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And he was talking to, he came back to you in very layman's, because you tried to say, well, hold on a second, a paedophile doesn't get this sort of sentence. And he said, don't go down that road. And he started to explain layman's terms about the sentencing guidelines. I understood exactly what he was saying. But what troubles me about that is so it then takes you back to, if she hadn't pleaded guilty for trying to incite racial hatred, so let's say, for example, she put a tweet out and she hasn't really thought about the bigger picture, and her intention is not to get people to actually go and do that. She's come out of pure rage and anger. Because possibly when you're on that Twitter thing, you don't probably maybe think about how many people it's going out to. Or how many
but you need to. You need to think about that. You know,
you do. But then we haven't got to school to learn about this. This has all come to us in the last 15 years or so.
But it has been around for a while, and you've got to remember, when you're putting stuff on social media, it is published. It can come back to haunt you, and that's what she found out about that, unfortunately.
Well, she has, and it's a hard lesson, but it's a very hard lesson to find out about, something that you maybe should be thinking about. I agree. I don't disagree with what you're saying there, Peter. It's a really good point. But do you see what I'm saying? I suppose what I'm going back to is, if she wasn't maybe advised, inverted commas, to plead guilty and maybe put the case forward that her intention was not to incite racial, it might have created a different argument in the court.
I agree with you, Darren. I agree with you, Darren. What often happens, though, is that a barrister or a solicitor will say, just plead guilty, you'll get a shorter sentence as a result. The solicitors and the barristers, I don't know what they advise her, I don't know, I've no insight into this, but what I do know from a few friends who are in the legal profession is that, look, you're probably going to be advised, plead guilty for this, they're going to get you on this. Well, if you plead not guilty, your sentence will be harder and harsher. If you plead guilty, it'll be more straightforward. The fact is that it was very, very harsh. I think you can argue, as I think that guest was yesterday, that, look, it went into the highest category, of inciting racial hatred. But I think you're absolutely right, Darren. I agree with the vast majority of what you're saying. It is absurd that she's in prison, and it's absurd that she's in prison for so long.
Okay, just one last thing on that, then, Peter.
Sure.
Then what you're saying there, and I hear what you're saying about, you got friends talking about the legal profession, they will advise that. But then, so you could argue there's a possibility that they would have got it wrong in their advice in the first place.
That's a definite possibility. Definitely. Yeah. No lawyer is perfect. No barrister is perfect, and advice is just that. It is an opinion. It is advice. It's not something that is necessarily gospel, as Lucy Connolly found out, I think.
Last thing, really quickly, Peter.
Go for it.
I know you've got a show to get on with.
Go for it.
What a cop-out.
This is the show, Darren. This is the show. So you tell me your final thought there.
Well, what's a cop-out? I just heard your tape playback from today. Was it Prime Minister's Question Time when he was asked by Rupert Lowe? What's a cop-out? That man, I don't know how he stands up. If you really have the conviction, have the courage and conviction to say what you think, don't come off of mealy-mouthed sentiment, disingenuous sentiment. That bloke, I mean, what did he actually say? What does he ever actually say? I mean, even if you disagree with him, if he said, no, I actually think the sentencing, I back the judiciary, I think the sentence was right for this, he sort of come across and goes, oh, I want to protect all people from dangers out. She hasn't created any danger out of the street. It's not answering the question specifically, is it?
It's a very fair point, Darren. It's a very fair point. I think a lot of people feel exactly the same way. Thank you for your thoughts on that, Darren. Thanks for all your points, actually. I do love it when people come on and say, oh, you've got a show to get on with. It's like, this is the show. And the people who call in are the absolute priority. I love talking to all the different people, like James Heal, for example, but I love the callers more, because this is my show, but it's your show too. We're going to take more calls, more thoughts from you, maybe even some voice notes after the break. Stay with us.
But a lot of the investment and jobs is going to be for foreign workers, isn't it? Because you're going to invite Indian companies to employ... Yes, you're going to invite Indian companies to employ Indian workers here. They won't pay national insurance. You're going to invite people under the age of 35 to come here from Europe, and they may be able to bring their dependents with them. What do you mean, no? Those are both things that you've announced that you're doing.
This is Talk. Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Teresa is in Leicester and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Teresa, you're very welcome to the programme. I know we've spoken before, and actually...
I think we have.
Yeah, and you were, if I remember correctly, quite emotional about this issue. Are you happier now?
No, not particularly.
Do you think Keir Starmer has done the right thing today?
Well, it depends what he's going to do.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. Like I say, I won't starve and I won't freeze. I don't, believe you me, I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination. But I do feel that a lot of people have been harmed over this last winter.
Yes.
And I don't know how to say it, to be honest. I think the man's an idiot.
He's lost the trust of a lot of people, Teresa. Has he lost your trust?
Oh.
Maybe he didn't have it in the first place. I don't know.
I never had his trust in the first place. I never would have voted Labour.
Yeah.
But this has just proven to me that he's just beyond stupid.
Yeah.
That he thinks that people are going to vote for him, and no, never in a million years.
It'll be very interesting to see what he actually does as well. Teresa, thank you for that. Ian's in County Durham. Ian, what do you think Keir Starmer should do about this? He's announced some sort of change is coming, but what do you think that change should be? Thanks for your call as well, Ian.
I think it should be that they look fairly at how the winter fuel allowance is distributed.
What is fair? What would a fair system look like to you, Ian? Because we can talk about fairness, but what does it actually mean?
Some people at the bottom end of the pensioners are on a wage where they're basically surviving.
Yes.
I'm very much like that last caller that was on. We're not going to literally starve, but it means the difference between our livelihoods being sort of cosy and comfortable or not.
Because just a few £100 can make a massive difference, can't it? If when you're talking about, like, it's so expensive, the energy prices are going up. We were told they would go down, but there are many people caught in the middle here. There are so many millionaires and so on that I don't think necessarily should get this, but there are a lot of people in the middle, aren't there, Ian?
So whether they can do it up tax banding or whatever, I don't know.
Yeah.
Our monthly fuel allowance just before the problems, we were paying, say, £1,000 a month.
You were paying £1,000 a month for fuel?
For gas and electric.
Flipping heck, £1,000 a month, Ian. That's huge.
£100 a month. It was 1,100. It was £100 a month and went up to 160.
Yeah. Okay. Listen.
That's like 60%.
Yes, that's a huge amount of money.
That's for £300. This last winter, what we did, we only put the heating on an hour a day.
An hour a day. So you must have been pretty cool the rest of the time, Ian.
Mainly at night when I sat down to watch the TV.
Yeah.
7 p.m. to 8 p.m. and then we put a thick jumper on after that.
My goodness. And people just making those kind of decisions like you, Ian, I mean, that's intolerable. That shouldn't happen in our country.
Yeah, that's what the difference is. Just a small amount can make so much difference.
Yes, yes.
People's quality of life.
Do you think you'll get it back, Ian?
No. I would like to think so. I think he's doing a dramatic U-turn because it was just so unpopular.
Yeah.
And particularly in the local elections, that the amount of seats they lost. So he's having to do something to gain credibility.
Yeah. Really interesting talking to you, and I wish you well. My goodness, you've really made me think an awful lot about this issue, and I really appreciate that. That's Ian there in County Durham. Mick in Wallington says, you can't trust Starmer. There will be restrictions on any fuel tax U-turn. Reeves should now resign. Thank you for that, Mick. Peter says, your guest Judy has a point, but you have to claim the pension. It's not just given to you. Another person says, don't forget those who have never worked have been entitled to the winter fuel allowance and all the other benefits that are attached. How is that fair? Says that person. It's a very, very good point. Regarding Lucy Connolly, Mary in Cyprus has been in touch and says, I don't believe she should have been given a prison sentence, but she was. Sadly, one far outweighing the crime. She has already done 9 months, so for goodness sake, let the poor woman go home to her family and recover. Just my opinion, says Mary. It's not just your opinion, Mary. Your opinion is very important, and we appreciate all opinions. We're the home of free speech here and the home of common sense, and if you want to get your opinion across, don't diminish yourself, Mary. Don't say just my opinion. You're very, very welcome to send in any thoughts, and I appreciate that from Mary in Cyprus. Appreciate you watching and listening from abroad as well, whether you're at home or abroad, whether you're out and about, whether you're in your home or one of the car dwellers, you're very welcome on this programme, let me tell you. Jane says, it sounds like as if the threshold is going to rise for winter fuel allowance, so many missed out last year over a few pence. Another person says, regarding dating a lefty or a righty, I can't even bear to be in the same room as a lefty, let alone the same bed, says this person. Well, we're going to talk about that next in regard to the fact that apparently Reform UK voters are proving very popular romantically. We'll talk to Lucy Beresford about that in just a second. Would you swipe right for a righty? Let me know. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to this person who says, I think it's disgusting the flotilla was diverted today. It's a poor day for Britain. I agree with you absolutely on that. Chris in Broadstairs says, regarding the migrant boat, today of all days, you would have thought the French authorities would have ensured the commemoration of Operation Dynamo could go off without any impediments, as it was because of these brave boats the UK had an army to eventually free France. That shows what the French really think of us. And an extension of this view was the traitorous deal with the EU yesterday. That's Chris from Broadstairs in Kent. Rachel says, the Foreign Secretary certainly doesn't speak for me. Is he representing the British government or Hamas? Israel is at war against an organisation who wants to exterminate the Jews. They're doing what they need to do, says Rachel. And Kim says, Peter, I love your show. It's always full of facts and common sense. Thank you. Regarding the boat that was diverted, I used to water ski and drive a speedboat. All boats leave a wake behind them, which can create large waves. If the boats were to get too close to the illegal migrants' boat, their wake could cause the migrants' boat to overturn. With the weight of the boat and how low in the water it is, the wake can cause a disaster. I think it was a health and safety matter. Not pushing aside the boat would have been a disaster. I don't want the migrants here, yet I don't want anyone to drown either. Thanks, Peter, says Kim. Appreciate your thoughts on that, Kim. Now then, I would never date a Tory has been a slogan for lefty liberals on many dating apps. In fact, I know of some profiles on dating apps that say no Tories, no TERFs. TERFs, of course, being people like Julia Hartley-Brewer and me who think that a man is a man and a woman is a woman because, you know, that's biological fact and stuff. But it turns out that some people would swipe right for reform. People browsing online dating profiles in 2025 are apparently more open to dating reform supporters than Conservatives, according to new research. Left-wing voters are more likely to reject someone on the right than vice versa. However, profiles that pledged to support Nigel Farage's party fared better than those who supported Kemi Badenoch's party. Let's speak to Lucy Beresford, psychotherapist and broadcaster, no stranger to a political opinion and analysis herself. Lucy, will you be swiping right for the right-wingers?
Oh, of course, yes. Anything to excite my love life. But I think there are two things happening here. The first is that we tend to date people who we imagine are similar to us, who've got a similar education background, perhaps even similar age, although not always. And political preferences definitely mean that you have something that is something in common. And if you are centre to centre right, that invariably means that you are going to focus on people who are either Conservative or Reform, as opposed to people who are maybe Greens or Lib Dems. And that brings me to the second point, which is that nowadays, if you're right wing, you could be a Conservative supporter or you could be Reform. But the brand of the Conservatives is now so tarnished that actually people are preferring to swipe right on Reform voters, that actually that doesn't have the same toxicity to it as the Conservative brand.
I mean, that's fascinating, especially as Reform UK has often been seen as having some toxicity, not by me, it must be said, but there's so many people on the left in particular who say, oh, they're all right-wing, you know, dreadful gammon-y people, gammons and all that, you know, all these kind of awful phrases, these horrible words that I actually think are actually racist, believe it or not, in regard to people who support Reform UK. But is there a novelty value to Reform UK, perhaps, or are people just opening their minds a bit more? Because, I mean, Nigel Farage and others in Reform have a sort of cheeky, chappy charm, which is perhaps a little bit of a fresher approach in terms of how they do politics, never mind what their policies are.
Well, there is some sense in which it's not so much the novelty value, but people are hearing about Reform and they're hearing about the brand more often, and therefore it's not an alien concept. It doesn't seem too outrageous. It seems like something that people are talking about or they read about in their newspapers. So again, it's that familiarization. It reminds me of when, not that I'm a fashionista, even though I know that you are, Peter.
Of course.
When you have that situation where something comes along and it's a new wave in fashion, in the beginning you think, well, that's just too outlandish. And once your eye gets used to it, you think, oh yeah, actually I'm seeing this around in the high street at various social occasions. I'm taking that more on board. Similarly with words about Reform, people are talking about Reform so commonly now that it's less of an alien concept and people feel safer.
I think it was the philosopher Joel who said, don't you know about the new fashion, honey? All you need are looks and a whole lot of money.
And you're going to sing that?
No, I'm not. Although it is still rock and roll to me. In terms of if you're on the left, how do you find love? I mean, do you sort of put on your profile that you like quinoa, knitting yogurt and, you know, Hamas? Or I mean, what's the way that people do that?
Well, the really interesting thing is that in the early days, it probably wouldn't matter quite so much whether somebody was very different to you. So you could say that, yeah, you have a wheatgrass shot every morning, that you believe in complete redistribution of wealth. You could put all sorts of things out there, and people might be tempted to sort of date you just to see what that's like. The key comes much further down the line when you're thinking about having a longer term relationship. And the key to success in long term relationships is the idea that you share values. And if your values are not aligned, chances are that relationship won't last. And one of the biggest indicators of alignment is, what are your political preferences? So yeah, you might be a quinoa, sandal, flip-flop wearing, you know, llama hugger for all I care. But if we've got very different attitudes to things like politics, and also money and sense of humor, the chances are this relationship is not going to last.
Do you know
so
what?
Maybe
I actually
don't
know.
Tell everyone about your quinoa fetish.
I don't have a quinoa fetish, it must be said. I actually, on a very serious note, know a couple in Northern Ireland. One is a Protestant, one is a Catholic, and they know that it would cause such a problem in regard to where they, with their families, with their extended families, in regard to where they sent their children to school, whether it was a Protestant school or a Catholic school, that they have decided not to have children as a result of that, even though they're
not to have children.
Yes, even though their marriage is a very, very strong marriage, and they're very, very good people. I mean, I just find that incredibly sad. At what point does politics actually matter? Because of course people, I'm obsessed with politics and I'm interested in politics and all the rest of it, but a lot of people aren't. And Tony Blair said in his autobiography, A Journey, which I haven't bought because I don't want to, fund war criminals, but it says, he said in that the hardest thing for any practicing politician to remember is that most people, most days of the week, don't give politics a second thought. So is it actually that important?
Well, what we do actually see is that quite a lot of people put on their dating profiles the fact that they are apolitical. And I think people were very scarred by things like the Brexit vote and by quite a lot of the noise around politics, and very worried that actually it would maybe put people off because if they put their political viewpoint out there, and they just didn't really want to have dates that were spoiled by too much political whataboutery. Having said that, if you are going to have a longer term relationship with someone, you do need to know where they stand in terms of their values. And one might argue that politics, issues around money and issues around fidelity are the top three things that you really need to speak to people about.
Give me those again. Sorry, fidelity. What were the other two?
Interesting that was the one you remembered. Fidelity, money, and politics.
Okay.
That actually you do need to maybe have those conversations quite early on in the dating process, particularly if you don't want to waste your time. You don't want to fall in love with someone and then discover that they're incredibly reckless around money or around fidelity, and certainly around maybe they're promiscuous in terms of their political allegiances as well. Better you find that out earlier in the dating process than much further down the line when you've got.
But do people, I mean, from a psychological perspective, people just project and they think how someone is going to be. I mean, I've had so many conversations, one in particular I'm just thinking of and sort of cringing at, where I had a really nice conversation with a couple of Lib Dems who were at an event. I was a friend of mine, it was a very social event, we were chatting. I was a special advisor at the time working for the then Conservative government. There were, we had a long conversation. It was all really nice. We're talking about all sorts of things, the NHS and a few touched on politics a little bit, but not very much, just family and all the rest of it. And at the very end of the conversation, the guy stood up and said, well, it's really nice to meet you. And his wife said that, it's really nice to meet you. You're actually a very nice person for a Tory.
It's tricky. This is what I mean about the tarnishing of the brand, that actually I have also been in situations where someone says, I've never met a Tory and I never want to. And I'm kind of sitting around the table thinking, well, there are half a dozen people here who you claim that you don't want to meet. And I think it's that silo that we run the risk of inhabiting if we don't actually get out of our comfort zone every so often and discover that people who have different political views to us are actually still normal people, and they love their parents and they're kind to animals. This sense that the othering that is going on at the moment, particularly in politics, that if you disagree with me, then you must be a really awful person.
Yeah.
And that's something I know that you try very hard to address in your attempts to be, you know, to disagree without being disagreeable. That actually, if people were a little bit freer in terms of their dating preferences, if they were more, and in dating, it's really interesting because you often encourage people to say, well, yes, I know you're not really interested in football or you're not really interested in photography, but why not swipe right on this person? Because you might find out some really interesting things and just have a pleasant evening in their company.
Yeah,
exactly. But if someone is so rigidly saying, because of that political preference, I now don't even want to meet you, that is a very wounding thing for society, because society is more about making connection, not about closing yourself off to connection.
Thank you, Lucy. Really interesting to talk to you today. That's Lucy Beresford, who's a psychotherapist and broadcaster. Nigel Farage has talked about the flotilla being diverted. These are these little ships that, in commemoration of Dunkirk, 85 years on. This says it all about the destruction of our history and our values, says Nigel Farage. The aggressive young males on their way over here have nothing in common with us. That is what Nigel Farage has put on social media. So what do you think about what Lucy was saying, about what Nigel Farage has said? 0344 499 1000. We'll do the sport next. Stay with us.
Does the Prime Minister agree that imprisoning Lucy Connolly, a young mother with a 12-year-old daughter, for one foolish social media post, soon deleted, is clearly not an efficient or fair use of prison?
I am strongly in favour of free speech. We've had free speech in this country for a very long time and we protect it fiercely. But I'm equally against incitement to violence against other people. And I will always support the action taken by our police and courts to keep our streets and people safe.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, it's now time for the
Sport Summary on Talk.
I didn't realise there was an extra bit there. Sam Ellard is with us from talkSport.
Hey,
Hello,
Peter.
Sam. How are you doing?
Really, really good, thank you.
Good.
How are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, all good in the hood. All
good
fine.
in the hood.
Yeah, it's all
I
good.
also loved, like, normally when presenters on talkSport like throw to a, what would you call that piece of, like a stab?
Yeah.
They normally like do a real aggressive like finger point, like.
No.
You just lifted the eyebrows in the air.
That's all I need. That's all I need to do to make things happen, Sam.
That was smooth. The eyebrows went up and the sting came in. That's why we love the PC, the Cardwell.
Listen, I live to give. What can I say?
There we go.
It is a huge night in football. Tell us about the Europa League final. Bilbao.
Are you excited?
I mean, I'm ecstatic, as you know. Yeah, I can't wait. I'll be rushing home.
Don't be sarcastic. I'm sensing sarcasm there.
You know the difference between someone who makes a sarcastic remark and the person who doesn't get it? Do you know what that's called?
No.
The sarcasm.
That's probably me. I don't get
You're in the sarcasm.
I don't get massive game tonight. It's the Europa League final between Manchester United and Tottenham. And what makes tonight's final completely unique is that Manchester United are 16th in the Premier League.
Yes.
And Tottenham are 17th in the Premier League, which just in itself is laughable. And I can't quite believe that we're into mid-May with one Premier League game to go, and both Man United and Tottenham are literally the two teams that are above the relegation zone.
Yes.
And, you know, if Ipswich...
And here they are in the Europa League final.
And here they are in the Europa League final.
Yeah.
Their league form this season has been laughably bad.
Both of them.
Both of them. Mm-hmm. And they're actually, ironically, quite lucky that the three teams that got relegated, Ipswich, Leicester and Southampton, they're so lucky, Man United and Spurs, that not at least one of those sides were half decent, because they honestly could have been in a relegation battle. But to be fair to them, in Europe, they managed to navigate the league phase, they managed to get through the knockout stages, and here they are in the Europa League, where one of them's going to walk away with the trophy. And also, if you win the Europa League, you get automatic qualification into the Champions League, which is the European competition above the Europa League.
I sort of have a slight issue with the Champions League, because there are loads of people in it who aren't really champions, are they? They've come sort of fourth, fifth, etc. They're not what could be called the champion.
Sure. So it used to be back in the day before I was born. That's how the champion.
Back in the day before you were born, when everything was in black and white.
I can't remember what happened there. There used to be where it was just the winners, but obviously things have changed. So sure, but let's not try and take the fun out of football. Come on, it gives people a release on a Wednesday
night. It does, and that's okay.
So
you'll be, of course, full coverage on talkSport.
Yeah, I'm doing a watch-along tonight on talkSport's YouTube channel with Jamie O'Hara and Jason Cundy, who will do the sports bar after on the radio, but during the game, Jamie's a Spurs fan. We're doing a live watch-along on the YouTube channel, so should be a lot of fun.
What is your prediction?
I think it's going to penalties, because both sides are so bad, I don't trust either side to get the job done in normal time or extra time. I think it's going to penalties. We'll go Spurs on penalties. There we go.
Interesting. OK. There are two games in the Premier League last night. How did the teams get on?
Yeah, so it was a big game for Man City because they've still got to try and finish in the top five, which would be Champions League football for next season. They beat Bournemouth last night by 3-1. That means City are third on 68 points. So top five gets Champions League football, and it's quite exciting going into the final day of the season, because just 3 points separates third down to 7. So 5 teams on the final day of the season. 3 will get Champions League football, 2 won't get Champions League football. So City, Newcastle, Chelsea are 3, 4 and 5, and then Villa and Forest are just outside the top 5. And also it's nice that Forest play Chelsea this weekend, so it sets it up quite nicely for this weekend, where 3 teams will get it, 2 teams won't be. City beating Bournemouth by 3-1 last night, and also Crystal Palace played last night as well. They've got nothing to play for in the league, but it was the first time they played since winning the FA Cup on Saturday. They beat Wolves at home by 4-2. Great night at Selhurst Park, being able to celebrate the FA Cup victory, where they beat Man City on the weekend just gone.
Did they do that thing where they parade the cup round at the start of the match as well? Yeah. So it's never great when you then lose the match. I know they didn't, but it's never great when you lose the match after that happened.
And also it's quite nice because this weekend on Sunday, Liverpool play Crystal Palace. Liverpool have been on the beers the last 2 weeks celebrating the Premier League, and now you've got Palace winning the FA Cup.
Yeah.
It could be the most laid-back, fun game of football in the history of Premier League football.
Maybe get a few younger players out there, give them a bit of a chance. Yeah, certainly. England are underway in the cricket tomorrow. Tell us about where they're playing.
Yeah, so it's the first time England will play this summer. They got the big test series this summer is against India. 5 test matches to look forward to that starts in a few weeks' time. So tomorrow is it's a test match against Zimbabwe, a bit of a warm-up game for England. Big opportunity for Zimbabwe, who don't play as much test cricket as the other kind of nations. And yeah, England want to get off to a good start.
So you think England are probably just going to win? It won't be there won't be any sort of Herrera situation?
Unless there's really bad. It's in Nottingham. I haven't checked the weather forecast in Nottingham.
Right.
Oh, so was that the pun?
That was the pun.
I didn't even get it. Say it again.
It was like a hairy situation, but a Harare situation.
Oh, because
of
so sorry.
So Sam asked me when we're in the break there. Sam asked me to put a pun in because he likes it when I do puns. I did the pun. He completely missed it.
You know what? I did ask you for a cricket pun, but you got stumped, didn't you?
Hey!
Anyway, England Zimbabwe. Unless it rains heavily, not again for the next few days, England should win. Sam Cook's going to make his Test debut. Best of luck to him.
Yes, well, excellent, good stuff. England versus Zimbabwe. That'll be
literally couldn't care.
It's not that I don't care. You've given us the sport update, Sam.
I really want one day you just to go, yep, couldn't care less. That was so with the sport. Anyway, back to
Do you know what? Lucy, who was on just before, Lucy Beresford, who was on just as you were coming in, she did say there was once, I can't remember if it was you who was on, it was someone anyway, and they said, look, everybody in football's been talking about this, and apparently went, yes. Like,
definitely.
As if you knew anything.
It's the first thing I thought when I woke up this morning.
The trick is to know what you don't know. And to bring in experts who do know what they're talking about, which is why you're here.
Do you know what? If you were to sit there and fake like Jeremy, he fakes it.
Do you think so?
Oh, of course he does. He pretends he knows everything. He fakes things, gets everything wrong, and you
hold on. A broadcaster pretending they know everything. What?
Name names.
What could be next? Sam, thank you so much. That is Sam Ellard there from talkSPORT. Really appreciate his contribution. The sport update today. And Donald Trump is in the White House at the moment with the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and Trump has apparently ambushed Ramaphosa during a meeting at the White House by playing videos which he claimed pertain to allegations of genocide in South Africa. The US president was hosting the South African leader, who sat quietly while the footage was played. He later said, I'd like to know where that is because I have never seen these videos. Gosh, that is a massive breaking story. We'll bring you the video of that when we have it. That is Donald Trump talking to the South African president. He is in the White House, and of course there are all sorts of allegations that many white farmers in South Africa are being persecuted as a result of policies not unlike those in Zimbabwe previously in regard to land being taken off them. And Ramaphosa says that white South Africans are not persecuted. Donald Trump has condemned South Africa's racist laws, as he says. We'll bring you the latest on that, of course, as the programme goes on. Big breaking and developing story there, Donald Trump in the White House. We will, of course, talk about that. Just briefly before the news, I want to talk to David in Gloucestershire. David's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000, and I know that winter fuel is on your mind. David, what are your thoughts?
Well, I was just thinking, Peter, I don't know what all the fuss is about. Starmer only said he would think about it. He didn't say he would, and I wouldn't trust him further than I could throw him, quite frankly. So that'll probably get scrapped in the long run.
He's opened the door to it, David. It would be very difficult. I mean, why open the door if you're not going to do it? It would be a very difficult thing now not to do, would it not?
Well, Kemi Breadnott actually put him on the spot and said yes or no, and he wouldn't answer it, so you wouldn't trust him.
Yeah, she asked him as well about raising taxes. She said, are you going to raise taxes, yes or no? And he just didn't say anything about that either.
No, but the other thing I did think about was the whole, the 300 quid. I mean, my own electricity and gas, the standing charges alone come to £330 a year.
Yes.
And that is something that really needs looking at, know. I mean, I think it's disgraceful, I mean, I'm all right, but, I mean, some of these poor pensioners, I mean, I can give you an example. I mean, I'm blind. I go to a blind group, and we have noticed significant numbers of our members who are mostly elderly, to be fair,
yes,
are not coming out, and that is because they just cannot afford it.
No,
they won't say anything because they're very proud people.
Of course.
They are not coming out to their groups and everything because of the,
You're absolutely right. I spoke to one man on one occasion, David, who said that he gets on the bus, the local bus, and he sits in the bus, just goes round and round in the bus for hours because he can't afford to keep his house warm. There's some heartbreaking stories. David, thank you for your thoughts. That's David in Gloucestershire. We have on the screen now, if you're watching, but I'll describe it to you, the White House, and in the Oval Office, Cyril Ramaphosa, who is the President of South Africa, sitting beside Donald Trump. It appears the particular portion where Trump was asked, he wants Ramaphosa to do about the images displayed on the screen that appeared white South Africans mourning their loved ones by visiting a burial site. He holds up a stack of papers with photos of white South Africans' faces that Trump says were murdered. We're going to talk about it, says Trump. The room is erupting into chaos, apparently. Reporters shouting questions about Trump and Ramaphosa. We'll bring you clips of that. We'll get those to you as soon as we can. We'll talk about this major breaking story in the White House next here on Talk. So stay with us and give us your opinion too.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk Drive. It's just gone 6 o'clock. Let's go live to the White House now, where Donald Trump is talking to the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. It's one of those meetings that we've seen many of with other leaders, and unsurprisingly, there's been conflict with Zelensky and various others. Now, apparently, with Cyril Ramaphosa because of allegations of genocide in South Africa against white farmers. That is not true, but certainly white farmers have been under huge amounts of pressure, and there are many who've been persecuted. Let's just dip into exactly what Donald Trump is saying right now. A room full of reporters, and indeed the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa.
I'm here for my health. I'm here to see what it is. No, I'd like to see. I have friends. I can tell you, Ernie Els and Retief Goosen, they feel so strongly they wanted to be here on behalf of South Africa, not on behalf of me. And, you know, they said, can we be here for this?
Well, all smiles at the moment. A laugh there from Cyril Ramaphosa, the President of South Africa. But a little bit earlier on, Donald Trump essentially ambushed him during that meeting at the White House by playing videos which he claimed pertained to allegations of genocide in South Africa. The US President was hosting the South African leader, who sat quietly while the footage was played. He later said, I'd like to know where that is, because this I've never seen, President Ramaphosa said. He's asked what he wants Ramaphosa to do about the images displayed on the screen that appeared to show white South Africans mourning their loved ones by visiting a burial site. As Trump holds up a stack of papers with photos of white South Africans' faces that Trump says were murdered. We're going to talk about it, says Trump. The room is erupting into chaos at that point earlier when that report came through, as reporters were shouting questions towards Trump and Ramaphosa. We'll bring you that clip as soon as we have it. We're looking through that footage right now. But what we do know is that the President of South Africa will not have been expecting that. Certainly the policies in Zimbabwe previously under Robert Mugabe, where there were many, many white farmers who were persecuted, put off their land and tortured, maimed, all sorts of persecution of them. That was a story for many years, really at its peak a couple of decades ago or even 10 years ago. Now the same thing allegedly happening in South Africa to many people, and we know that President Ramaphosa will have some knowledge of that. There have been reforms of land laws and so on. We'll get an expert to talk about it before 7 o'clock, but let's go to Brendan O'Neill, chief political writer at Spike. Brendan, extraordinary scenes in the White House again as a result of what President Trump has said and done.
Really extraordinary scenes, and there's no way Cyril Ramaphosa hasn't seen some of those videos that Trump seems to be showing him, you know, where you've got radical black activists calling to kill the farmers, kill the Boers and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, that was one of the songs that the EFF, which is Julius Malema's political party in South Africa, has been singing at many rallies for many years. It's not Cyril Ramaphosa's party, but it is a major political force in South Africa.
Absolutely, and Ramaphosa will know about that. He will have heard that song, and that's not to say he endorses it, but he'll certainly be aware of it. I'm aware of it, and I'm far from an expert on South African affairs. But, you know, I agree with what you said earlier, that it's not true that there's a white genocide in South Africa. I think that's become a bit of a conspiracy theory, and it spreads fear amongst white South Africans, most of whom live quite peacefully. But there has been attacks on white farmers, there have been attacks on white landowners, and they have been pretty savage and really awful. And I think it's right to give some of those people refuge if they feel that they need it. But it's interesting that Trump seems determined to use the Oval Office, not for the niceties of presidential handshakes, which is what it's traditionally been used for, but to have showdowns with international leaders. He did it with Zelensky, he pressed Keir Starmer on the freedom of speech question, and now he seems to be hammering Ramaphosa. So the transformation of those Oval Office meetings into showdowns.
You're absolutely right, Brandon. And I mean, the seats were barely warm under Joe Biden. They were in there, they sat there for sometimes like 90 seconds, and no reporters would shout questions, they wouldn't be answered. It's what's known as a spray. The idea is that the snappers come in, take the photos and get out. Other reporters in there as well. But now, I mean, these things sometimes go on for hours. They certainly did with Zelensky and Starmer. We were all smiles there a minute ago, and certainly there seemed to be Ramaphosa, from what I can see on my screen in front of me, is smiling at the moment. But clearly a very, very awkward exchange from Trump previously.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, I think there are pluses and negatives to this kind of showdown that Trump's having with leaders. You know, the negative is that it does undermine diplomacy. There is an important role for diplomatic niceties. That's important in international affairs. But at the same time, one could argue that Trump is lifting the veil on all that performative politics, and he's having these arguments and disagreements out in public where everyone can see them. So you could say there's a democratic element to what he's doing in the Oval Office. But I think this showdown with Ramaphosa, it seems particularly extraordinary because it seems Ramaphosa did not expect this at all, and he was laughing awkwardly for a while. So it'll be interesting to see what ramifications this has.
We'll come back to that in just a second, Brandon, but there's a couple of other stories I want to ask you about. One is about the U-turn on winter fuel, on the winter fuel announcements and the cuts. What do you make of this, Brandon?
You know, I think it was The Sun that referred to it as a half-baked U-turn, and that is what it looks like. It seems that Starmer wants a few older people to regain their access to the winter fuel allowance, but not necessarily all the people who had access to it previously. He doesn't know what he's doing. This is the most flip-flopping prime minister I can remember. And he's clearly reacting to his unpopularity. He knows that his slashing of the winter fuel allowance, in Diane Abbott's words, is potentially his poll tax, and therefore he's trying to backtrack on it rather belatedly. I don't think it's going to be enough. I think he's trying to appease certain sections of the electorate with measures like this, but he's also ticking them off with other measures like going back into the European Union, or undermining Brexit, or refusing to stand up for freedom of speech. So he kind of gives with one hand and takes away with the other. he doesn't know how to challenge the reform challenge. And that's, I think, what's going to be defining his prime ministership for the next few months.
And it's a very interesting aspect within that free speech aspect, the Lucy Connolly story as well. Starmer's Britain turning into a police state is what Boris Johnson says. Do you think he's being sincere? Do you think he's saying this for a reason, because he believes it, or because of the timing and perhaps a weak Kemi Badenoch? I have a phrase I use quite often: just because you're cynical doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's true that Britain risks becoming a police state. I mean, the fact that there is a woman in jail for 31 months for something she wrote on the internet is outrageous. And we can all agree that what she wrote was repulsive and potentially an incitement to violence, if you could understand it in that way, of course. And no one's going to defend her words, but that is a severe, stiff, ridiculous sentence. And it does raise the question of two-tier policing in this country. Let's not forget when a gang of men drove down Finchley Road in North London and started shouting, "We will rape your Jewish daughters. Bring out your Jews so we can rape them." There were no charges brought against those men. And likewise, shortly after the 7th of October attack, an imam in Redbridge gave a sermon in which he said, "Destroy the Jews' homes, ruin their houses." And again, no charges were brought against him. So a lot of people will be asking why some people go to jail for saying horrible things and other people don't. Again, it comes back to that identitarian two-tier justice system that we seem to be living
To say
under.
nothing of Kneecap, the band who said, "Kill your local MP." There doesn't seem to be anything that has happened with that. The police said they're looking at the footage. Well, I'll tell you something, it's a 10-second clip that we have played on a number of occasions on this station, and it's very, very clear that there is a member of Kneecap saying, "Kill your local MP." They've also said, "Up Hamas and up Hezbollah." There should be criminal charges brought against them. There have not been. Where is the equality of justice here?
You know, what really strikes me in relation to all of this, I think that's right. There's no equality of justice, it seems, on the freedom of speech question. And there is the staggering hypocrisy of the left in particular, because they will man the barricades for the right of Gary Lineker to share a post comparing Zionists to rats. They will man the barricades for the right of Kneecap to celebrate neo-fascist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. But when it comes to a feminist saying you can't have a penis and be a lesbian, or men can't become women, or anything else, then they will gleefully blacklist those people for their supposed speech crimes. So we now have a situation where left-wingers will defend the most horrendous speech and then punish you for expressing biological truths. That's how upside down politics has become.
Let's talk about migration, Brendan, because a lot of people really annoyed, as I am actually, about the dog that has been quarantined, has been brought into this country. It's not the dog's fault, it's the migrants' fault for putting, the illegal migrants' fault for putting it on the boat. And then another story emerging this afternoon, the Telegraph reporting about the migrant boat forcing a Dunkirk commemorative flotilla to divert. Nigel Farage saying this just says everything about the state our country's in.
I think Farage is absolutely right on this. Nothing better sums up modern Britain than that flotilla story, because this is a Dunkirk commemoration which has to be diverted because, of course, we're escorting another illegal immigrant boat into the UK. That tells you everything you need to know about Britain in 2025. Well, we can't even celebrate the glories of our past because we're too busy ferrying illegal migrants into this country across the channel. It really is an extraordinary sign of the times. You know, the dog story is funny on one level, but it's really horrible on another level. Firstly, that someone would put a dog through a journey like that. But also, there will be people out there, Peter, and they will be asking, why is a dog getting more funding from the government than I am? Why is this dog being looked after with more taxpayer money than some people who are hard up here in Britain are getting? So even dogs, it seems, are sometimes treated better than ordinary Brits, and that's going to really annoy a lot of people.
Especially when you even just do a brief calculation, back of the envelope calculation, of the thousands of pounds the quarantine will cost, which is being funded by us, the taxpayers, not being funded by the illegal migrant. It is being funded by the taxpayer. And then what happens to the dog next? I'm sure there are lots of people who would very happily adopt the dog, but if it goes back to the migrant, are we ever going to get that money back? We're talking about thousands of pounds the taxpayer has doled out for this, when there are many people, as you correctly say, who today might have a little bit of hope about getting their winter fuel allowance back, but there are perhaps 10 of those people who could have got a winter fuel allowance had we not spent the money on the dog in the first place. I know it's not like for like comparisons, but it is that fairness and straightforward issue really about a migrant's dog being treated better and having, you know, shelter, food, warmth, when so many people just do not in this country?
Exactly right. You know what? It's not the individual stories themselves or the ridiculous stories themselves. It's what they all add up to. And what they suggest, I think, to lots of people out there is that we live under a political class that doesn't really care about us, which is more interested in funding housing and hotels for illegal migrants than it is in keeping old Brits warm at night over the winter. That's really what these stories speak to, and people are clocking that every single day. They are looking at Starmer's government and thinking this government cares more for people from overseas and the European Union than it does for people here in Britain, and that's really what's going to push people further and further to reform, I think.
John has been in touch on this and says a vet needs to examine a dog 24 hours before leaving France and do tests for fleas and ticks, as these can carry rabies. That's why it's a serious offence to bring any animal into the country without it being checked, vaccinated and given the all clear, let alone a migrant's dog in a boat. It's laughable how lax we are, but serious if we had an outbreak of rabies, like in parts of Europe, says John, who seems to know what he's talking about there. On South Africa as well, we'll come back to this. We're going to play you a long clip after the break of what has happened in the Oval Office. Gary says, I left South Africa because as a 50-plus white male, I just can't find permanent work due to racist black economic empowerment laws. I mean, there's a lot there. Also, Leslie says, who do you think deserves the winter fuel allowance? A millionaire who has paid thousands into the coffers, or someone who has never worked? Again, that issue of fairness. There's a lot of people really quite baffled at what the government is doing, how they're actually running the country. And I wonder if you've any hope, Brendan, that actually Labour can get a handle on the chaos that is Britain in 2025.
I really don't think they can. And I'm not just saying that to sound depressing or just to be down on Labour. I think there are probably some good politicians in the Labour Party, but I just think it's a party that doesn't know what it's for anymore. This was a party that was founded to represent working class people in a world in which they weren't being represented. It's now a party that has turned its back on working class people, which looks at them with contempt and pity and sees them as gammon and people who are undeserving. So this is a party with a severe crisis of mission, crisis of purpose. It doesn't know what it's for, and that's why Starmer is such a uniquely flip-flopping politician, because the party that he leads doesn't know what it's supposed to be doing.
Brandon, just one more thing, perhaps on a slightly lighter note. There's a story today about dating, about the fact that people on the right, and particularly Reform UK supporters, are apparently quite popular online when it comes to some of the dating apps. I just wonder what your perspective is on this topic. I wonder if you've seen it. It's certainly interesting that that's the case, because there are, I don't know if you've seen these, I don't know what your marital status is, Brandon, I'm not asking, but I've certainly, I'm certainly aware of people online and so on who say things like no Tories and no TERFs and all these kind of things, and I just wonder what your perspective is on that.
Yeah, never kiss a Tory. That's one of the slogans that left-wing daters use. I think it's actually not that surprising, because if you're a young person and you're interested in reform, you're probably going to be an interesting, confident, possibly colourful person. You know, people probably would rather date someone like that than a kind of gender-fluid, blue-haired person who's always having a breakdown because someone misgenders them. You know, people are probably moving away from those rather depressing prospects towards young people who have got a bit more about them. I think that's what this is about.
Someone once asked me what my pronouns were, Brandon, and I said each and many. Don't misgender me. Those are pronouns. Those are my pronouns. Don't misgender me. Brandon, thank you very much indeed. That's Brendan O'Neill there. He's the chief political writer at Spike. We're keeping an eye on the White House. We're going to bring you the full footage of exactly what happened there in a few minutes' time. Let me read out a few other messages here. Adrian in South Wales says, I think our Chancellor is detestable and should lose her job. Am I guilty of inciting racial hatred? Says Adrian in South Wales. Hans says, hi Peter, great show and great topics. Perhaps I'm being naive, but couldn't Prince Charles and members of the royal family intervene and plead for clemency on behalf of that unfortunate mother who's been cruelly imprisoned and treated so harshly by the judiciary, says Hans. Another person says, we will not forget that on the day Starmer cut the winter fuel allowance, he gave train drivers $10,000 a year pay rise. Was that the same day? Gosh, I must be misremembering that. Jane says, what a load of rubbish. If you fall for someone that said personally, Peter, good looks and kindness, this country has lost the plot, says Jane. And Benji says, I honestly think that the US is going to cancel the UK-US trade deal, as words in Washington are saying that Vance is really annoyed after the EU deal, and Slam has slammed a lot of this. There's a lot in that, and we'll certainly continue to cover that story in regard to the Middle East and so on. We've got the White House on the screen. Can we just hear a little bit of what President Trump and Cyril Ramaphosa are talking about, the President of South Africa?
Yeah. And that's a very hard living. Going from city to city, from country to country, and hitting a ball 350 yards like they do, and
better than you and I.
Getting the ball in the hole. It's a very tough, with lots of people watching, right?
Yes,
That's a very tough living. You know, they're champions. I respect champions.
Well, that is Donald Trump talking to Cyril Ramaphosa. Things seem a lot lighter in atmosphere now than they were earlier on when Cyril Ramaphosa, the President of South Africa, was asked by Donald Trump about what he termed a genocide against white farmers. I mean, that is factually inaccurate. That is not happening, but there are many white farmers who are being persecuted. We know that some of them have been murdered as a result of some of the sentiment that is in South Africa at the moment towards white landowners and farmers, similar to what happened in Zimbabwe previously. We'll talk more about this in just a minute here on Talk.
You think that expecting not to have two-tiered justice, expecting people to work if they can, not having open borders, deporting illegal migrants, you think that is all far right, don't you?
No, I believe a constant fear of immigration and xenophobia and white nationalism.
White nationalism now?
I've been on doorsteps. Have you gone and knocked on doors?
Yeah, I have.
Some of these people, they are bothered about less and less white faces in their communities.
They're bothered about a load of people come to the country who don't share any of the values, don't share any of the culture.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, extraordinary scenes in the White House. Donald Trump talking to the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. This is what happened.
Well, I can answer that for the President. It's for him. No, seriously.
I'd rather have him answer.
Yeah, I'd rather answer that. It will be.
Our President will respond to you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. President.
It will take President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans, some of whom are his good friends, like those who are here. When we have talks between us on the around a quiet table, it will take President Trump to listen to them. I'm not going to be repeating what I've been saying. I would say if there was Afrikaner farmer genocide, I can bet you these three gentlemen would not be here, including
my Minister of Agriculture. He would not be with me. So it'll take him, President Trump, listening to their stories, to their perspective. That is the answer to your question.
But, Mr. President, I must say that we have, wait. We have thousands of stories talking about it. Sure. And we have documentaries, we have news stories, and that. Is Natalie here, somebody here to turn that? I could show you a couple of things, and it has to be responded to.
Yeah, sure.
Let me see the articles, please, if you would, and turn the lights down. Turn the lights down, and just put this on. It's right behind you. Johan.
There's nothing this parliament can do. With or without you, people are going to occupy land. We require no permission from you, from the president, from no one. We don't care. We can do whatever you want to do. Who are you to tell us whether we can occupy land or not? We are going to occupy land. Yeah. South Africa occupy land. That's who we are.
Now this is very bad. These are burial sites right here. Burial sites. Over 1,000 of white farmers, and those cars are lined up to pay love on a Sunday morning. Each one of those white things you see is a cross, and there's approximately 1,000 of them. They're all white farmers, the family of white farmers. And those cars aren't driving, they're stopped there to pay respects to their family member who was killed. And it's a terrible sight. I've never seen anything like it. Both sides of the road you have crosses. Those people were all killed.
Have they told you where that is, Mr. President? No, I'd like to know where that is, because this I've never seen. But okay.
I mean, it's in South Africa. That's where.
We need to find out.
Well, extraordinary scenes there in the White House. Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, shown footage. We didn't see the footage there. The shot that we had there was of President Ramaphosa listening to those allegations from Donald Trump that there are many thousands of white farmers certainly have been persecuted. Some have been killed. There's no doubt about that. Genocide is far too strong a word to use. There are clear racial tensions there, and there are farmers in South Africa who have been really badly persecuted and, as I say, murdered. Astonishing scenes there in regard to Donald Trump, as we were talking about with Brendan O'Neill a little bit earlier on. Those kind of meetings are meant to be very brief things, but actually the lights were dimmed and footage was shown of what was happening. Clearly, President Ramaphosa of South Africa had absolutely no idea that was about to happen. He didn't look too uncomfortable, it must be said, but diplomatically, this is really fascinating. We're going to talk more about this in the next half an hour. We're also going to talk to a Conservative MP, Graham Stewart, in just a second about winter fuel. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, On your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much. What a dramatic evening. We'll return to that South African story in just a few minutes' time. Bob Seeley is going to talk us through it in regard to what's happening and what President Trump has said. But I want to return now to the UK and speak to Graham Stewart, MP. He's a Conservative MP, former Minister. Graham, how are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you, Peter.
Very interesting day in Parliament, certainly in regard to the winter fuel U-turn by Keir Starmer. We're going to look in just a second to remind ourselves what he said, but was this unexpected for you, and can he regain any of the trust he's lost, do you think?
Well, I don't think it's unexpected because it was a really terrible decision. It was the first thing they did, wasn't it? They came into office, they gave no hint beforehand. In fact, they promised specifically they would protect pensioners, and then they came in and they cut the winter fuel payment for the very poorest, causing, according to their own analysis from previous years, thousands of people to die in the winter. And now they've come up with a half, baked suggested change. They haven't been able to give us any details, and it's too late. It's too late for the old people who lost out the support when they needed it most this winter. But, I think the pressure was immense for Keir Starmer. His backbenchers were starting to panic after the local government elections because it came up on the doorstep from people who just said, didn't matter whether you were old yourself, you just went, this is wrong. And they couldn't defend it. And, I think now the big question is, he said he's going to bring this in at a big fiscal event. In other words, budget. Can it really be Rachel Reeves, who's the architect of this assault on pensioners, who presents that fiscal event?
You think she's vulnerable? I
think she's got to go. This is a major success, I have to say, for Kemi Badenoch. When we're out, we're still unpopular. It's hard to get cut through. But Kemi has been absolutely focused on this, laser-like, challenging the Prime Minister week after week after week.
Well, let's just have a look at that
now. They've decided to change course.
We're just going to look at what Starmer said, then Badenoch, and then I want to go back to what you're saying about Rachel Reeves, because I think that's really interesting. You're one of the first people who's raised that with me. I know it's been around for a while, but particularly in relation to this. Let's just see what Starmer said at Prime Minister's Questions at lunchtime today on this issue.
As the economy improves, we want to make sure people feel those improvements in their days as their lives go forward. And that is why we want to ensure that as we go forward, more pensioners are eligible for winter fuel payments. As you would expect, Mr. Speaker, we will only make decisions we can afford. That is why we will look at that as part of a fiscal event.
Very interesting. So let's just see how Graham's party leader, Kemi Badenoch, responded to that. It was actually a little bit later on in Prime Minister's Questions, but of course the U-turn by Keir Starmer dominated proceedings earlier. This is what Kemi Badenoch had to say.
He promised to protect pensioners, but his winter fuel cut has driven thousands into hardship. His MPs hate this. He can't see them, but they all look sick just hearing what it is he's going to do. So let's wait until... Oh, yes, they're laughing. They're laughing. They are laughing just as they laughed at the budget. Hands up who here wanted winter fuel cuts. Hands up. Not a single one of them. Not a single one of them. The fact of the matter is, this Prime Minister is destroying them. They need to look at what they are doing to the country. The truth is, we all know that it is this Prime Minister, this Labour government, and their policies that are shafting the country, isn't it?
Kemi Badenoch, undoubtedly one of her strongest performances at Prime Minister's Questions. Keir Starmer on the back foot. Let me get into this a little bit more, Graham, because it's really interesting when you get rid of a Chancellor. I'm not saying Rachel Reeves is necessarily going to go, but you're thinking she has to. We saw with Liz Truss, for example, she was incredibly close politically to Kwasi Kwarteng. When he went, it was clear she was going to go fairly soon afterwards. Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer appear to think the same way, although I'm not sure Keir Starmer actually thinks very much about the economy. I wonder if to lose a Chancellor is something which is really major for a Prime Minister. Do you honestly think that'll happen between now and the budget?
Well, Peter, I'll put it the other way. Imagine the fiscal event at which she turns up when the flagship first thing they did out of the door after 14 years in opposition was, and it was Rachel Reeves' decision to do so, was to cut the winter fuel fuel payment. And she's going to be there, standing up, saying that they're making changes. How they do that as well is going to be a different question. But I don't think it can stand. And the jobs tax is another disaster that she's brought on the Labour Party in order not to put on direct taxes on people. They've ended up doing this indirect tax, which has contributed in so many ways to rising prices. If you look, EU prices are falling at the moment, and what our inflation has gone back up 3.5%. Worth remembering that we had the fastest growing economy in the G7 when we left power. We had inflation back at 2% and 4 million more people in work. Instead, Labour, under Rachel Reeves, have brought the economy to a halt, and we see 100,000 more people on the dole. And that's before they bring in other things like the Employment Rights Bill. So I don't think she can survive. And if Keir wants to survive, now he's got restive backbenchers who are making it, by the day, they're getting braver, because they can see, especially after the local elections, that if they don't do something different, they're going to get cut down too.
The poll tax was seen as Margaret Thatcher's sort of beginning of the end of her time as Prime Minister. I don't imagine, Graham Stewart, that you have agreed with Diane Abbott on many occasions, but when she says this is Keir Starmer's poll tax moment, is she proving that even a stop clock tells the right time twice a day?
Well, absolutely. And Diane Abbott's been very clear on this and strong, and I haven't, she's got it spot on throughout. This is who thought that this is what a Labour government would do? Who thought that the first thing they would do would be to come in and betray people who've paid in with taxes all their lives? And now we've got a panicked U-turn showing that they recognise they've miscalculated. But you saw Keir Starmer there, the same ghastly delivery he's got, no apology. And they're only going halfway, if that. We don't have the details. It's not leadership. It's damage control. That's what we're seeing. And this isn't a government that's been in for a decade, as was, Margaret Thatcher when that happened, or, after our 14 years, it gets more difficult. This is a government with a huge majority. The public may not have voted for them in huge numbers, but were prepared to give them a chance and support them. Instead, they blew it. And who did that? It was Rachel Reeves. So I think, I may be proved wrong, Peter. You're a pretty shrewd judge of the political scene.
Flatterer.
But I think Rachel Reeves is in a very difficult position.
Interesting.
She's not only got the wrong policies, but she is a terrible communicator, isn't she? I mean, she's positively robotic.
Well, let's talk about someone who is a good communicator, and that's Boris Johnson. He has said about the Lucy Connolly controversy that Britain is turning into a police state. I want to talk about that substantively in a minute and look at what Rupert Lowe said at Prime Minister's Questions. But just before then, given that Kemi Badenoch, look, she had a good day today, there's no doubt about that. She had a good day at Prime Minister's Questions. But nonetheless, latest YouGov poll, 16% in the polls, your party is in serious trouble, Graham. Is Boris Johnson on manoeuvres, do you think?
I don't think so, no. And, we're less than a year after an election in which we got soundly thrown out. I think the collapse of Labour has created a kind of vacuum that has sucked reform up. It flatters them. Now we'll find out, Peter, whether they're just a souffle that will collapse when the heat goes off, or whether there's something there. But you can capture the mood of the nation when they're angry and cross, and that goes you a certain way. But when it comes to a general election, people want competence. They want to know that you're going to be able to look after their family's future, and I don't believe that reform have yet shown that, but
they're 4 years.
See. As you say, we have a lot of work to do, but Kemi Badenoch stayed focused. She's not rushed off in multiple directions. She picked this as an issue, and she forced a U-turn from Keir Starmer today. And I think
you think she forced it herself, really?
Well, I really do. It's been absolute focus on it. It is just keeping it alive. I mean, we're all part of it. I've been relentlessly focused on it in my own efforts at communications because it's just so wrong. It's impossible. And that's made a difference. And Kemi chose the subject, drove it hard, and now we see the government U-turning. In opposition, what more can you do, Peter? OK,
let's talk substantively, as I say, about the Lucy Connolly issue. I just want to play the clip now of Rupert Lowe at Prime Minister's Question Time and the question that he asked the Prime Minister on this, and then get Graham's reaction. This is Rupert Lowe, the independent MP, formerly of Reform UK, asking this question at lunchtime at Prime Minister's Questions.
Does the Prime Minister agree that imprisoning Lucy Connolly, a young mother with a 12-year-old daughter for one foolish social media post, soon deleted, is clearly not an efficient or fair use of prison.
Mr. Speaker, sentencing is a matter for our courts, and I celebrate the fact that we have independent courts in this country. I am strongly in favour of free speech. We've had free speech in this country for a very long time, and we protect it fiercely. But I'm equally against incitement to violence against other people. And I will always support the action taken by our police and courts to keep our streets and people safe.
What do you make of how Keir Starmer answered that question, Graham?
Well, it's in character, isn't it? He's a North London lawyer, so he answers like a lawyer rather than like somebody who actually represents people. I think people look at that particular case and they wonder about two-tier policing, and that's one thing that British people hate, the idea that we would have two-tier justice. It's why, you know, we had Northern Ireland questions today as well, and David Davis was focusing on the two-tier treatment of people in Northern Ireland, as asking, why is it that the people who set out to protect property and save lives are being prosecuted or at risk of prosecution, and those who set out to destroy property and take lives are walking around free? This kind of two-tier system goes down very badly with people, and it's important that you know, we do respect the independence of the courts, but you've got to be tone deaf not to see that there's people who actually do genuine damage are getting treated one way, slap on the wrists, and someone who, you know, may have been having their own personal problems, makes a temporary tweet, finds themselves locked up for a long time.
Okay.
It's it's something I think one could at least sympathise with, and you know, it make people angry if they feel they've got a system which is rigged one way or the other. No one wants bias in anyone's particular favour. They want us all treated the same. It's supposed to be one of the founding principles of this country.
Just before you go, just briefly, Graham, you've got two flags behind you there. I'll just describe them for our listeners on the radio, but many people watching on the screen as well. You've got the Union flag over your right shoulder. Over your left shoulder, is that the Yorkshire flag, or what is that? It is
indeed. It's the Yorkshire flag.
The White Rose of Yorkshire. There we are.
White Rose of Yorkshire.
Graham's constituency, of course, Beverley and Holderness there. So very good, great stuff. Now, I just wanted to clarify that. I would imagine there are a few people sitting at home wondering what that flag was anyway. Very familiar with the one over your other shoulder, of course. Graham, thank you very much indeed. That's Graham Stewart there, who is the Conservative MP for Beverley and Holderness. We're going to talk about this story about the President of South Africa being confronted in the White House, in the Oval Office, in fact, with images and stories about white farmers being persecuted in his home country. A bit of an ambush, really, from Donald Trump. It's a fascinating story. We're also going to talk a bit more about a few other issues as well. Stay with us here on Talk.
You think that expecting not to have two-tiered justice, expecting people to work if they can, not having open borders, deporting illegal migrants, you think that is all far right, don't you?
No, I believe a constant fear of immigration and xenophobia and white nationalism.
White nationalism now?
I've been on doorsteps. Have you gone and knocked on doors?
Yeah, I have.
Some of these people, they are bothered about less and less white faces in their communities.
They're bothered about a load of people come to the country who don't share any of the values, don't share any of the culture.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, let's remind ourselves the extraordinary scenes in the Oval Office. This is a little bit earlier on this afternoon. In fact, I think the meeting is still going on or has just ended between Donald Trump and the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. Let's just remind ourselves what happened. This is in regard to white farmers who are being persecuted in South Africa.
Let me see the articles, please, if you would. And turn the lights down. Turn the lights down and just put this on. It's right behind you. Johan.
There's nothing this parliament can do. With or without you, people are going to occupy land. We require no permission from you, from the president, from no one. We don't care. We can do whatever you want to do. Who are you to tell us whether we can occupy land or not? We are going to occupy land. Yeah. South Africa, occupy land. That's who we are.
Now this is very bad. These are burial sites right here. Burial sites. Over 1,000 of white farmers, and those cars are lined up to pay love on a Sunday morning. Each one of those white things you see is a cross, and there's approximately 1,000 of them. They're all white farmers, the family of white farmers. And those cars aren't driving, they're stopped there to pay respects to their family member who was killed. And it's a terrible sight. I've never seen anything like it. Both sides of the road you have crosses. Those people were all killed.
Have they told you where that is, Mr. President? No, I'd like to know where that is, because this I've never seen. But okay.
I mean, it's in South Africa. That's
Donald Trump there speaking to the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, in the Oval Office. Extraordinary scenes there, and you know, they dimmed the lights, they showed this footage and so on. Clearly President Ramaphosa not expecting that. Well, Bob Seeley is a former Conservative MP. He's a military expert. He's author of Total War, about new forms of warfare in the 21st century, and we're going to talk to him a bit about the Middle East in a minute or two. But Bob, I know you're very familiar with what goes on and what has been going on for some time in South Africa. Did the President have a point?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I visited Zimbabwe 15 years ago when that murdering thug, that murdering Marxist, Robert Mugabe, was clinging to power by destroying his agricultural industry in Zimbabwe, by directly attacking Zimbabwe's white farmers. Because they were efficient, because they were outside his control, and because he could use them as, vile European leaders from the Middle Ages onwards have effectively used the Jews as a useful sort of ethnic, capitalist sort of target for his ugly tribal politics. And there's no doubt that South Africa is doing the same. A little bit of sympathy for Cyril Ramaphosa. I think he's the least corrupt of South Africa's leaders in recent years, since Mandela, who's a good man. But I think what's fascinating here, Peter, is the way that Donald Trump, like him or not, is turning the Oval Office into something approaching, the finale of The Apprentice. And effectively, he's brought in South Africa's leader and he's just said, "You're fired."
Well, it certainly is a dramatic development, and clearly Ramaphosa not expecting it. I wonder how much of a difference it will...
Yeah. Every world leader now is going to think about, do I actually want to go into the Oval Office?
Yes.
What is going to happen to me? I mean, we had Starman, King Adenoid, go in there and sort of just physically sort of sweating away like he was a sort of...
What's he going to say? What's he going to do?
Yeah, slightly.
And Zelensky, of course, I was on air when it happened, when Zelensky was brought in, and that turned into a huge row. Ramaphosa seemed to slightly take it in his stride. I was sort of oddly impressed with the fact that he just went, oh, right, tell me where this is and give me the details and I'll look into it. It can be very difficult, especially when you've got the world's media looking at you, to know how to react when that happens.
Yeah, I mean, look, it wasn't the worst reaction. I thought the way that Trump treated Zelensky was appalling. Whether or not Zelensky played his hand perfectly, actually he shouldn't have done it. But this is Trump's style, and look, he knows how to get noticed as a world leader. Not only because he's the leader of the US, but effectively you never know what's going to happen with him. And as I say, he's just turned the Oval Office into just a massive entertainment draw, because he's calling in these world leaders, and you don't know what's going to happen to them, whether they're going to play him like Macron did, as much as you can dislike or like Macron. Starmer looked visibly nervous and rather shaking when he was in there. He turned over Zelensky, foolishly in my opinion, but I think he's absolutely got a point here. The fact is that black African states have been turning on their white farmers for decades now.
He did use the word genocide, though, and we've got to be really careful about that word, because it has a specific meaning, and whilst there are horrendous things that are happening to many white farmers in South Africa, I'm not denying that for a second, that was a huge exaggeration by Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a technical and legal term for genocide, and you can go. I'm sure that you can find a lawyer who would interpret it either way. Are you saying it's? I wouldn't call it genocide personally. Oppression of people, I think you've got to be pretty careful.
Yeah.
And I know the bar has been lowered in recent decades, but actually the original genocides, you go back to World War II, potentially before, but you look at Nazi treatment of the Jews.
Sure, so Srebrenica and Rwanda and places like that, which, But
even Srebrenica wasn't necessarily, look, it was a mass murder. I'm not sure if you're then into genocide. So, yeah, the term is being misused, but sadly Trump is not the first person to misuse the term. But if you're trying to destroy white farmers as a class, you've arguably got a case there that it is absolutely systemic, and it is a way of, playing the ugliest form of class, but also race politics. So I'm sure somebody could actually make a credible case for that.
Speaking of somewhere else where the phrase genocide is often misused, there is clearly a case in Israel that the UK government believes anyway that it has gone beyond just self-defence. Intolerable attacks on Gaza. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, has been talking about this in Parliament yesterday. I just want to play a clip now of what he was saying then, and then ask Bob about it. And actually the Israeli Ambassador CP Hodavelli, who's been interviewed, I've interviewed her on this programme a number of times, she was called in by the Foreign Office and told that trade talks are going to be suspended. Let's see what David Lammy said in Parliament yesterday, and then I'll get Bob's reaction.
Netanyahu's government is planning to drive Gazans from their homes into a corner of the Strip to the south and permit them a fraction of the aid that they need. Yesterday, Minister Smodrick even spoke of Israeli forces cleansing Gaza. Destroying what's left of residents, Palestinians, being relocated, he said, to third countries. We must call this what it is. It is extremism. It is dangerous. It is repellent. It is monstrous, and I condemn it in the strongest possible terms.
Well, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been talking. He's been giving a press conference in the last few minutes, and he says that war will continue until all parts of Gaza are under Israeli control. I wonder, Bob, what you make of both Prime Minister Netanyahu and indeed the Foreign Secretary David Lammy's comments on the changes that have happened in regard to the UK's relationship with Israel over the past few hours.
those people. I have to say, I'm not a particular fan of either of them. But
Me too.
I think, look, the problem is with Lamy, he has zero credibility after his sort of student politics before he got into power. And I don't really buy what he says on Israel, and I don't really buy what the Labour Party says on Israel, because of their desperate sort of battle to keep their Muslim vote in the UK. What's happening, look, I despair what's happening to the Palestinians, but there is a simple problem here that Hamas is a genocidal organisation, truly genocidal, because they just want to kill every Jew. Okay, I mean, that's pretty much in their constitution. So they're a genocidal organisation. They seek and glorify in the slaughter of Jewish human beings, which personally I find repugnant and disgusting. And they use the Palestinians as effectively tools to fight their war. And the more that they can encourage, the more that they can hide their own military within hospitals, in schools, the more they can get Palestinian kids slaughtered, the more that they can parade
it's a propaganda victory, and I agree with every single word you've said, Bob.
You see these fools and who march every Saturday clogging up London. If I was Jewish, I would feel hugely uncomfortable walking around these vile people.
The problem is, though,
they're
Bob, sorry, we're just running out of time, Bob, and sorry to rush you, but I just want to ask you two more questions. The problem is, though, that there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. There's no doubt about that. And as someone, both of us are big supporters of Israel, not necessarily the Israeli government, but certainly the state. But it's becoming increasingly difficult to defend what is happening in Gaza. And I just wonder what your thought is in terms of what the best way to apply pressure. I'm not talking about the Israeli government necessarily, although that's part of it, but also on Hamas to free the hostages and to end this war.
Hamas have got a choice. They can free the... Look, I mean, the problem is, you've said it yourself. Hamas are keeping other people hostage. And this war ends when Hamas stops treating people as hostages and actually puts down its weapons. But the problem is, since 2007, Hamas has used the Gaza Strip as a recruitment ground, as effectively a source of income, which it has always used, therefore, or always since used, in order to plan attacks to kill Jews. And instead of actually trying to develop the economy of the Gaza Strip, trying to help the people there, it has always misused, when it has been able to do so, aid to build weapons that kill Jews. And that is the fundamental problem here.
Final question, Bob. This flotilla story, the Dunkirk commemorative flotilla of little ships going across the channel, commemorating the bravery of that evacuation, being told to divert because of a migrant boat keeping 1 nautical mile between them. What is your reaction to that, Bob?
I just think it's one of those stories that sums up in a really depressing way the age that we live in. I think the migrant boat should have been shot back to France, and our glorious little boats should have been able to go to Dunkirk. And I just think it's the sort of thing that makes people despair and think, well, what the hell is happening to our country?
Bob, thank you. That's Bob Seeley there, Dr. Bob Seeley, former Conservative MP and a military expert. Lots to chew over. Extraordinary scenes, Kevin O'Sullivan, in the White House there as well.
Yes, good old Donald Trump, extraordinary. Yeah. The funniest thing about it, it's another bit of theatre in the Oval Office after the Zelensky saga. The funniest thing for me about it was that standing there was South Africa's top golfer, Ernie Els. Ernie Els.
Bit random.
Very random.
Yes.
I mean, he likes to get sort of, if he gets the South African president, he gets a few celebrity South Africans in. But there's this bemused golfer standing
wondering what on earth
this chaos
is going on. We may well also ask the question, what on earth is going on in terms of this Dunkirk flotilla?
Well, I was just agreeing with Bob Seeley.
Yeah.
It's a snapshot of this ongoing shambles, the chaos of our migrant crisis, and it sums it up. And Bob also is very right. Never mind these fantastic small boats commemorating the Dunkirk evacuation getting out of the way. How about the migrant boat gets out of the way?
How about they get turned back to France and let the flotilla go across to commemorate the bravery of the people who were involved with that?
Absolutely.
You'll be discussing that in your show?
We certainly will, and I'm wondering how many dogs were on that migrant boat, because it seems to be the new thing. You keep hearing there's this daily battle to get onto the migrant dinghies, and you see it in the channel by the beaches in northern France. They're all fighting to get on. I wonder how that guy managed to get his dog on. I mean, if you were a migrant who couldn't get on, so can I have this seat that the Alsatians got, please?
German Shepherd.
German Shepherd. Why aren't you allowed to call them Alsatians anymore?
Are they the same thing?
Alsace, yeah, they're from Alsace.
Alsace as in Alsace-Lorraine,
It's because Alsace should call them German because Alsace is now German.
I don't know. I'll look into that. I'll get back to you.
Alsatians for me, thanks very much.
Fair enough.
Also, we're going to look into the judge, the appeal court judge, who rejected Lucy Connolly's appeal.